Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here on another beautiful day. I think it's about to be spring. And of course, daylight savings has hit. We have a little bit of extra daylight, but we lost an hour. And maybe we're going to lose more than that here today. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and here with me, the star of the Drive Thru, Mr. Happiness himself, Jim Cornette.
Well, Brian, why don't you come out and just say, yes, the sun is shining and the birds are singing and the wildlife is frolicking in the bushes because you're on some kind of drugs, and your reality is somehow altered, and the way you perceive things, you're in a more elated and instead of deflated state of mind like you usually are.
I wish that were true, but unfortunately, when you and Stephen Pinu got together a couple of years ago to institute that new wellness policy for the Cult of Cornette and for these programs, I haven't been able to do any drugs on the air, so that's not true.
Well, you've just blown my mind. That you've been malingering for medical issues over the last day or two, which is why we're a bit late. But now you're not on any type of mind-altering substances.
Well, I mean, mind-altering, no. I'm on Percocet and caffeine.
Well, there you go. You got the Percocet on your back.
But I got a prescription.
Monkey.
I got a prescription, so I'm good with the wellness program.
Well, you're not violating the wellness program, but you're not in a proper state of mind. And just to think that while I have been, now let me tell people what happened to you. Here's what happened to Brian Last, poor fella. A couple days ago, he got up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, and the seat fell on his head and gave him a concussion.
Oh, get the fuck out of here. Come on.
And they had to take you in and give you a brain scan, but fortunately, they found nothing. Brian, did they actually, from what I've heard, they actually had to take your brain out and then put it back in again?
Is this what you heard in The Observer?
That's what I heard in The Observer when they broke in with the breaking news about it.
No, that's not true. Just for the record, so we can start to show off and let people know what's going on. A couple of days ago, I had scheduled surgery on my shoulder blade, my back. There were complications, so then I had a second surgery, and now I'm home, and I'm drugged up, and I'm ready to try to do whatever the hell it is that we do here on this show. But that's the
And
update.
this is your show. This is your show.
Yes.
And I have to follow a person who's hopped up on whatever kind of goddamn Bolivian street drugs they gave you up at that hospital in New Jersey. They don't have fine hospitals up there like they do down here in Kentucky. They wouldn't have to do it twice if the guy knew what he was doing. That's why they call it practicing medicine. That's what they were doing on you, practicing.
I believe the hospital I was in is the #1 hospital in the state, but I think everything went all right.
Well, that's like being the nicest guy in prison. You're still in the state of New Jersey. Come on.
Hey, it went better than last time. I had this done in 2007, and I never told you about this. That ended up being a complete mental nightmare because I had this done. I had a good doctor. She recommended a good surgeon. He seemed all right, Jewish guy, and I'm Jewish. That always puts you at ease. I should have known something was up because he had like glassy eyes or just kind of, there was something in his eyes that he was like wild-eyed. I should have known something was up.
Wait a minute. You've got this fucking Marty Feldman fucking lookalike gonna goddamn operate on you?
I didn't say Marty Feldman. See, now it gets funnier now that you put that vision in my head. But there was something, I should have known something was off. So they do the surgery. I'm there. I'm talking to the anesthesia guy. Very nice guy. He's cracking jokes. They do the surgery. Seems like everything goes okay. Few months later, I get a letter from the New York City Board of Health telling me that they've been informed that various patients, and they're not exactly sure how many, who not only went to this doctor, but specifically dealt with this anesthesiologist, have been infected with hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and potentially HIV. And I need to go get tested immediately. They've been using dirty needles. So now I'm like, oh, fuck, it's over. Like, this is how it ends. This fucking guy. The next day, because I read at least 2 newspapers a day, and back then I was getting the New York Post and the Daily News delivered to my house. It was a full-page story in the New York Post. The smiling, joking, mustached anesthesiologist. They must have caught him walking to his car and just yelled his name, and he turned around. they got the most sinister photo of this guy you've ever seen. And it turned out he was using dirty fucking needles all over the place, apparently, for a long period of time.
How much money could he have been pocketing by doing something like that? Would that have been the only motivation?
You would think, and I guess that's kind of the same question I had. What's the benefit of this? Are you really saving that much? Luckily, I was okay. I had nothing, and they paid for all my testing and everything. But I'm Jewish and neurotic, so I was, oh my God, I'm dying.
Now, wait, I can immediately tell also because you said, well, fortunately, I had nothing, and they paid for all the testing. I was like, goddamn, here's $1,000. Put me up on the rack and run me from stem to stern.
But yeah, so that was the bad experience.
Did he leave anything around in me anywhere when they were fucking around in there?
Yeah, so that was that. And after everything that went down with my dad last year, I decided now's the time. Every single thing that could possibly be wrong with me, I'm going to have everything worked on and looked at. So,
you know, that shoulder, if you'd quit patting yourself on the back so much, you wouldn't have to keep having it fixed like that.
And I can't lift more than 10 pounds for the foreseeable future. So masturbation's out the window.
You couldn't lift more than 10 pounds before.
Oh, stop it. I can lift more than you. I can lift more than you.
That's what the butler's for anyway up there. He buttles and lifts. But anyway, I'll have you. And also you said this, I'm going in and out. It's an outpatient thing. And then you say, I'm going to be overnight. I'm overnight. I was like, what the fuck? They put my ACL back together and kicked me out an hour and a half.
Well, I had the first surgery and I was in, I guess, post-op. Suzanne's there. All the nurses are there. Everyone's having a great time. They give me my ginger ale. They give me an ice pop. And then they notice like, oh shit, there's a giant hard hematoma forming. Foaming. Not foaming, thankfully. That would have been really bad. But forming where they did the surgery. So like, we think we have to go back in. We have to find the doctor who went home and get him back. So the second surgery was like 11:30 that night. And that was that.
And then they got in there and they found a Pez.
A Pez, really?
Either that or a Junior Mint.
You like Pez?
Which one was it? It was the Junior Mint.
Junior Mint on Seinfeld, but let's talk about Pez. Mint. Do you like Pez?
Watley? Yeah, he was always a great guy. But nevertheless.
The candy Pez. No, the dispenser and the candy.
I don't frolic around with such things.
When you were a kid, you didn't like Pez dispensers?
I don't think they had Pez dispensers when I was a kid.
Oh, come on.
I never saw one. I went over to the general store and dipped my hand in the barrel like all the other kids to get my candy.
The barrel?
And liked it.
What? What was in the barrel? What are you talking about?
Right next to the pickle barrel and the cracker barrel.
At the pharmacy?
Over at the general store. Sam Drucker's place. That's where we used to go shopping back in my day.
What day was that?
Tuesday. But let me ask you, though, let's go back to your fucking medically induced coma.
Let's continue the happy talk.
Because the thing that was most poetic this week was that while you were actually being placed under the effects of anesthesia for a surgical procedure, possibly done by someone who's using dirty scalpels or whatever the fuck. No. The next scandal.
No, these people were good. I like these people.
Well, yeah, like the other guy, except for his glassy eyes.
Well, that wasn't the anesthesiologist. That was the goofy doctor, yeah.
Well, and he was using the anesthesiologist. And by the way,
I looked him up. I wondered, whatever happened to that fucking doctor, you know? I looked him up. I don't know the specifics, and I don't know if it affected me at all. Again, I had to have this redone now, but first one was in 2007. He's no longer a surgeon. Apparently, he's no longer allowed to be a surgeon. He is now doing hair replacement surgery in Manhattan. So that was an interesting thing to learn. Apparently, if you lose the ability to actually do surgeries as a doctor, you can just get a job doing hair replacement.
Well, what can possibly go wrong?
I don't know. Ask QT Marshall.
But nevertheless, so back to this the current quack that was the anesthesiologist, the gas passer, as they say in the trade. They're about to put you under so that they can roam around inside you and do all kinds of heinous things, and who knows what kind of fucking botulism and ptomaine and pestilence inside you. And at the very same time as that, Brian, in one of those poetic justice moments, millions of people, hundreds of people with millions of accounts on Twitter are wishing the grisliest of deaths upon you and I.
Yeah, the timing was impeccable. But, while you drink their tears, all I could do is mock them. So it kind of made the thing better, because I think it's all funny.
Well, you've established an award that you're giving out once a day.
Once a day when I could find someone good. I haven't looked through everything today, but the Elite Fan Showcase of the Day. Everyone wants to talk about the cult of Cornette and how mean and awful we are because we disagree with everyone on the crappy wrestling they like. We decided we would focus on the real toxic fan base, the real problems out there, the ninnies, the namby-pambies who can't cope with anything. So they send insane letters or tweets, messages. Sometimes they put stuff on message boards, think they can hide. And we're just going to start focusing on these people and showing everyone who they are. And in some cases, maybe exposing who they are. Stay tuned. There's going to be more to come with this.
Well, and the one that you tweeted the other day, I retweeted this with this comment because, again, at my age, not a lot touches me anymore, but it did bring a wistful tear of nostalgia to my eye that this blithering nincompoop, his email, except it was exactly the same as a letter that I would have gotten from a 14-year-old female fan of the Rock and Roll Express in 1986. The only difference being those were written in crayon and mailed with a stamp. And this is from what is allegedly trying to pass for a grown adult human fucking being. And it's like, and you saw some of them in the Midnight Express scrapbook, some of the better ones where the girls would draw pictures of donkeys with big dicks that would be sticking in my mouth. And this is you with an arrow to it. Right. And, I picked this just fresh, just for you. And they would put a real booger on the letter and circle it and then fucking mail it. And it's the same, literally wording in some cases and mindset, but we're 40 some years later, 40 years later almost. And instead of teenage girls smitten with the, Sean Cassidy, Leif Garrett, fucking phase of their life, these are apparently functioning men, I won't say men, males that are so broken up and their heads are on fire and they're, oh my God, they're one of their favorite, maybe not even their single favorite, but one of their favorite girl wrestlers. I don't know how to explain this phenomenon. Would you care to weigh in?
I think there are a lot of people, and we say a lot of people, several hundred, really, when it comes down to it, who, again, they can't cope. They can't deal with the real world. They flip out over everything you say, although they want to say you're irrelevant and they don't listen. They seem to know every single thing you're saying, although a lot of it's out of context. And I think it bothers a lot of people. If we're going to go back a ways, there was a concerted effort from people like the Young Bucks and Colt Cabana, people who had a problem with you, to make sure that any fans who didn't would. People who had a problem with you for either not using them or not just doing whatever they wanted. It began like a little over 10 years ago, the idea that Jim Cornette was this and that. And I think it bothers them and a lot of their fans that it hasn't worked out well. Because if we look at AEW, every single week,
the indie, let's refer to them going forward, the indie mindset crowd
Well, the
that
weak-minded
has been
indie
trying
mindset
to,
crowd.
well, the indie mindset wrestlers. I'm not talking about fans. I'm talking about the indie mindset wrestlers started that effort, their little clique, and wanted to take over the wrestling world, and we'll see how it's going for them. But go ahead.
And here we are now with the largest audience in wrestling audio history that grows every single week. And while promotions like AEW have a tough time holding on to their fans, we do nothing but grow. And I think when it hits some people, they realize, oh shit, we haven't been able to stop them. Not everyone thinks like us, that they're the worst people in the world because they don't like the wrestling we like, or they say funny things about the wrestlers that we've never met but we care so much about. And that's the reality. We keep growing. Every episode is bigger than the one before it. Every month is bigger than the one before it. And every year is bigger than the month before it. We've had exponential growth. And one day, maybe people will realize just how big this audience is. But I think that's the problem. You haven't
And how
been
humble
stopped.
you are. One of these days, people will realize how humble you are.
Do I say anything that isn't true?
I didn't say you were lying. I just said, they'll realize how humble you are. But you know what this whole thing is about the Riho scandal here. And while you were in that medically induced coma, I was trending again for 3 days because of people bantering back and forth about, which different ways that we should be boiled in oil and have our fat sold for soap. But you know what this whole phenomenon is like? I can only think of one thing. Actually, I've got 2 words for you, Brian. You know what they are?
No.
Mary Steenburgen.
I have no idea where you're going right now. So Mary Steenburgen, of course, the wife of Ted Danson.
I didn't know they were together. What happened to him and Kirstie Alley?
That was only on... They weren't even together on Cheers, were they? She was his boss on Cheers. And he wanted to get together with her.
I think she's a train wreck anyway.
Well, she's dead. She just died a few months ago.
She did? Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
I think she's a train wreck. Well, she's dead.
As you can see, I haven't fucking never paid a lot of attention either way. Nevertheless.
You know who really needs to get her shit together? Liz Taylor.
Well, hey, now don't you talk. This is what I'm going to talk about here in a second. Let's get back to Mary Steenburgen.
Yeah, where are you going with that?
Yeah, because here's the thing. Mary Steenburgen was in a wonderful flick with Malcolm McDowell back in like 1980 or 79, I think, maybe. Time After Time. Great underrated film. She's done. There's been several. And by the way, back in those days, in her younger days, she was quite the looker, as they say. And I've seen her in a couple of other things. There's that Mary Steenburgen. I would kind of say I'm a fan of some of her work. I haven't sought out all of it, the entire canon, but I've seen a few things Mary Steenburgen's in. And she made a nice impression on me. I've never met Mary Steenburgen. Don't know anybody that knows Mary Steenburgen. But boy, in a few movies, she was pretty nice. Now, if I was to hear, much like I didn't hear about poor Kirstie Alley, but if I was to hear that Mary Steenburgen got run over by a rainbow bread truck, I would pause in my day and I would reflect on that, and I'd say, well, that's terrible. And then I would go on with my fucking life. Because I've never met Mary Steenburgen. I don't know any of the pretend. Did she step out in front of the truck? I don't know. She might have brought it on herself. But the point is, now I can understand some people being, worshipful of Elvis or the Beatles or Frank Sinatra, generational world-shaking, changing talents. Remember the hysteria over Michael, but that's when he died. I don't recall people leaving candlelight vigils for Michael Jackson when he got off Twitter. But back to Mary Steenburgen. It's not like that if somebody in a grocery store or just in a public place, which Twitter kind of is, except it's kind of a anonymous public place, if somebody in my presence said, you know what, that Mary Steenburgen, she's the shits. It's not like I would do what the fuck? Don't you talk about Mary? You mother, come over here and say that, right? I'll snatch you by the goddamn you fucking, don't, Mary, oh God, Mary, don't you say, what the fuck?
None of them do that either. Again, there's a difference between what you say to people face to face and what you would type online when you're using an alias.
Why would I get upset about it enough to type it online? It's Mary fucking Steenburgen.
Well, maybe if you were a steamed virgin, you would be a little more upset about it, like some of the fans of AEW are.
That's what a cunning linguist you are.
Thank you very much.
But nevertheless, and now, so the point is, people were just losing their minds on Twitter, and their heads were on fire, and were every kind of ists in the world. And the best part about the one message you shared was that all of us and all of our fans, anybody who thinks the way we do, should get aggressive ass cancer. And which actually, I think somebody has now trademarked as the name of a punk band. But
it was the aggressive part that put it over the top.
Well, yeah, because ass cancer would be kind of blasé and everyday for the name of a punk band. But aggressive ass cancer, that's where you're getting into some fucking high octane ass cancer. But anyway, after all of this, there were a couple of people with some sense, only a few out of all of this I saw, but a few people with some sense, probably because they didn't really follow Riho on Twitter anyway, so they had to investigate a little further. And this is the latest thing I'm hearing. And folks, feel free to fact check this too if you want to, because it's not like we give a shit. As we mentioned, poor Riho, she's a grown adult, 20-something-year-old woman with a high-paying part-time job that the jury is out on whether she's suited for. And she deleted her Twitter account, which sent everybody into flames. And immediately, the fingers were pointing at us and our ilk for knocking her bad wrestling. But now some people are saying, well, the last tweet that she made before she deactivated her Twitter was just some innocuous thing. Like, well, I'm sorry I didn't get to see you all on Dark or whatever one of their YouTube shows is, because my match got cut off of it. Not like, God damn it, they cut my fucking performance. It was like, no, I'm sorry I didn't get to see it because I had a match there, but it got cut. And apparently a bunch of her Rihoites immediately jumped on that, adding either Tony Khan or AEW on TBS or MOUSE or the president of the goddamn Civil Rights Association or whoever they could say, how dare you cut Riho? And now some people are saying, well, she probably cut it because all of a sudden her fucking fans took some innocuous statement and started adding her fucking boss. How dare you, you no good slimy pad. We know the verbiage they use. There probably was some things about wanking dogs in there. So now is it, did somebody tell her possibly, or she just figure out on her own? Well, now fuck. Now my Twitter people are fucking yelling at Tony Khan. He'll take me off TV and put me in the Twilight Zone. Let me just shut this shit down.
We've said it before, and it's true, and I know a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it, but the most toxic fan base are the AEW most hardcore, and even a lot of the people who are really into The Observer. Not everyone. Again, not everyone. We have a major audience for these shows that are AEW fans. We hear from them. I like AEW. I like Jim's review of AEW. But then there are the fans, again, they can't cope with anything. And if you close your eyes and you think about who they are and what they do and what they look like, you probably can nail it right away. They can't cope with any of this shit. And look at what's happening now. They say all these things
but they have too much time to dwell on it. If you have time in your day to get on Twitter and scream for the execution and or the immolation or persecution or any other shin of people because they don't like your fucking favorite girl wrestler, don't you need more things to do productively in your life?
Twitter exists for a lot of people, and message boards exist for a lot of people to fill up the empty time that's not being spent with other human beings, or there aren't people that really value that person's thoughts. This is what these things exist for. And for everyone that points to the cult of Cornette and says this and that and this and that. And by the way, go look at Jeremy Bagley's Twitter. Go look at all the various charitable exercises that the cult of Cornette have participated in and all the various good things we've done. I guarantee you, there is no one in AEW who has ever received the vitriol in writing like we have from the AEW fans. We're okay with it. We don't give a shit. We ain't deleting anything. But the point is, for everyone's like, oh, the cult of Cornette are so bad. No, it's the opposite. It's you people. You people are the problem.
You people.
And by the way, we are a bigger audience than you. So if you want to fuck around, fuck around. We already know how this will end.
We already know who's going to find out.
Yeah.
And you need to start taking drugs before the show more often.
Why is that?
Well, because goddamn, right there was a statement and a half for you. And by the way, once again, I appreciate everybody's creativity in trying to think of different ways that we can be flogged into town square. But at the same time, it does kind of reflect badly when they put these things on Twitter and then everybody makes fun of them for being illiterate, incompetent, irrelevant, or any of the other ends.
You guys just make us stronger because you cause people who don't listen to us to check us out, and then they hear what you've pointed out of context. They hear the context, and then they hear the rest of the show. Then they start laughing. Then they start learning. Then they get hooked.
I just, as I'd said last week, we don't, if Riho wants to be an archaeologist or a brain surgeon or an international yacht broker from Toulon, France, if those are her strong points and she's interested in those fields, go for it. But again, it is part of the silliness and the childishness and the amateurishness of their indie mindset wrestling group that has tried and so far is failing to take over the wrestling world, or they're putting out some crummy programming, but they're still far from the big boys. But imagine that. Let me ask you a question, Brian. Who cuts a better wrestling promo, me or Mr. T?
I mean, that's not really a fair question. As a wrestling promo, obviously it's you. Mr. T's not really a wrestler, and his promos were more about the character of Mr. T.
Right.
So right. I'm giving you the win over Mr. T.
Okay, and actually, if it came down to it, who was the better worker in a professional wrestling match setting as far as taking bumps and understanding how to do the remotest of spots or finishes in 1985, Jim Cornette or Mr. T?
Well, again, I don't know if this is a fair comparison. You are a wrestling genius and a prodigy, and you kind of got it right away. Mr. T was learning on the fly and having a difficult time with some of the people he's working with.
Yes. Does that mean that they should have cast me to fight Stallone in fucking Rocky III or made me Hulk Hogan's tag team partner at WrestleMania?
Certainly.
And how ludicrous and stupid would anybody have been to do that? And how silly would it made the whole fucking deal look?
Quite silly.
So there you go. For the people who say, but Riho can do the moves, or Pockets can do the moves, our little puppy Pockets with his hands in his pants, playing the pocket pool. They can do the move. Well, exactly. So it just makes the fucking business look silly when they do it. Just like I would if I'd have been in the main event at WrestleMania or fought Stallone in Rocky III, even though technically I could do the lines better and or take the bumps better than the motherfucker that was doing it, who were completely untrained in that particular field of endeavor and weren't natural. It wasn't a natural at it either. So just a thing for thought.
Well, there's been a lot of thoughts. Can't believe we've gone a half hour already. Jesus.
Well, here, then let's get into this, because I need some help from the cult of Cornette now.
Uh-oh.
And you mentioned the charity fundraising of a variety of kinds that we have done and members of the cult have done. And I mentioned, many days ago when we did the experience for the cult members who have been basically browbeating me for not coming up with new merchandise, new collectible items on sale. I announced that the Big Spring Spectacular sale takes place on Saturday, April the 8th at noon Eastern at JimCornette.com, where we will have 3 new products. The Inside the Ropes magazine from December 2022, that was the highest selling magazine issue in the magazine's history, with the cover of me and the 6-page interview inside, the whole 48-page magazine. We're going to have 1,000 copies, and they can be personally autographed. And you save the shipping from the across the pond, unless, of course, you're having it shipped back across the pond. But you're getting it autographed. This is the only place. Also, by special arrangement with our friend Kenny McIntosh at Inside the Ropes, the DVD of the live event in 2016 in London with Jim Ross and myself, talking about the rise of the Attitude Era and branching off into numerous topics. And there's also a guest appearance the last 20, 25 minutes by Bret the Hitman Hart. And that can be autographed as well, or will be autographed as well. And here's what I need help on, because I announced the newest official Jim Cornette action figure. It was from Stacy's idea a couple of years ago when we were looking at her breast cancer awareness license plate and the pink and black. And she said, well, you ought to do one of those for breast cancer. I explained this story. And so basically that's what we've got is 1,000 are going on sale, autographed pink and black, breast cancer pink and black Jim Cornette figures. And I mentioned that we were going to donate $10 from each figure to the Susan G. Komen Foundation to help fight breast cancer. That's the whole idea, the whole purpose. So we're going to try to raise $10,000 to fight breast cancer. But now, since we made that announcement, and you've been in your, the hyperbaric chamber over there at the hospital, I've had a nurse in Canada email me, and I've had somebody else that has had a family member that was sick with cancer, write and say, oh no, you don't want to do Susan G. Komen because they spend more money on marketing and merchandising than they do actually fighting the disease. And you ought to do the American Cancer Society, which we have done before. Not only items from Cornette's Collectibles, but also Jeremy Bagley has done in honor of Dennis Condrey and others. And I'm open to that too. But now they've made me question. So what I'd like everybody to do, not everybody, 500,000 or 1 million people, I think would be a little much, but anybody that has an informed opinion on where the best place, Susan G. Komen or the American Cancer Society, that we could send this $10,000 that we plan to raise, because it's going to be the cult's money, so you guys should have a say in it. Email me at jimcornette@jimcornette.com with breast cancer in the subject line. And I'm not going to be able to read everything probably, but I want to get an idea of what everybody thinks if you guys are going to be an important part of this fundraiser.
Can I throw one in?
Please do.
City of Hope. When my grandmother battled breast cancer, like 20-something years ago, and I would drive her every day to the hospital on Long Island, she became a supporter of City of Hope. That was her charity of choice at that time. They help not cancer survivors, they help people battling cancer and breast cancer. So City of Hope is one I could recommend.
Well, now you've goddamn complicated it further.
I'm sorry.
We've got to change the fucking banner, which is up right now at JimCornette.com. If you want to see what this line of folderol looks like. There's banners on the homepage right now at jimcornette.com, and it goes on sale on Saturday, April 8th at noon Eastern. And now we're up in the air, and we want feedback from the cult on what's the best thing to do with this money for breast cancer, for this breast cancer pig figure. And once we get that, and I mean, don't spend tons of time, folks, researching if you don't already have a pretty good opinion, because over the next week or so, I'd like to hear about this so we can. And if anybody wants to throw in with the City of Hope also, as long as they got a fucking goddamn some type of legitimacy, we will entertain all options. And then we'll figure it out, and we'll tell people next week, and I'll have Hotchkiss change the banner if necessary. But that's what we're trying to do there with to make sure that everything goes to the right. And by the way, just since there was the controversy on the Facebook, previous unauthorized Outlaw Mud Show Facebook group, that they were going to start raising money for nebulous unnamed charities, as soon as these figures do go on sale and we do get the money and donate it, I will be having Hotchkiss disseminate the verification of the donation on Twitter and or wherever the fuck the social media is covered these days. That's his department. So that just to make sure there's no fucking funny, no shell game going on here. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to do that. So send me some emails about where to send this money, and don't get smart either.
Hey, on the topic of the new figure and the new color scheme, when you look back at your career, are there any outfits or colors that you regret wearing?
I don't think it would be possible it would be possible because I wore everything at one point or another. I regret, boy, the first Derby season that I was in a business in Louisville was great, because then I got all the colored blazers, right? Because when I got into business, it was the fall, and I went to the fucking mall, and it was like suits, yeah. And then, I got Mike Duncan, Teeny's nephew, who was the ring announcer in Louisville for a while and done television for years for Goulas and Welch, worked at a men's clothing store in the Hickory Hollow Mall, and he helped me obtain numerous discounts to get me started with the menswear. But we were dressing me at the time. We were dressing me like, yes, my team, I was a preppy rich kid, of the time, and everything kind of matched it, etc. But then, I'm thinking of Bobby Heenan, and I'm seeing Jimmy Hart. And as I got a little more oomph to me, and in the first Derby season, I got a bright red blazer and a bright blue one, and the white jacket, because now I've been in the business about 6 months. I'm trying to jazz up a little bit. I'm suddenly a fucking low rent Nick Bockwinkel, maybe in some cases. But I had some color and etc. there. And that seemed to get more heat from the people than me actually being a legitimate, normal looking fucking rich, preppy kid or whatever.
Yeah, see, that's one of the big what ifs to me about your career. What would have happened if, because it's kind of, I guess, 84, 85, where you really kind of went from regular suits and three-piece suits to kind of wearing more flamboyant stuff. What would have happened? Would anything have been different if you had never gone flamboyant?
If I'd never gone flamboyant? No, Barnett and I wouldn't have gotten along as well as.
Well, you didn't get along, so there you go.
I'm just joking.
But if 1988 Jim Cornette, if you were just wearing three-piece suits and nothing that was a standout color, do you think it would have made any difference in your career?
I mean, yeah, actually later on, maybe not at the time, but later on, I don't know that people would have they would have still seen the tennis racket, but I'm always remembered for, wild colors and, and the tennis racket kind of equally. Because it especially in the buildings we were in at the time, they were big, so you had to be able to see people. Now they're all up close to the ring, so you can get a good whiff of them right there up close. But I think it helped because, like I said, it got more heat from the people, and it was something else for them to yell at me, Kmart special or whatever. And actually, if you look back, there was a method to it. Everything matched in its own way, just, not necessarily what you would see somebody walking down the street, but you can say the same thing for Bobby Heenan's or Jimmy Hart's. And it was there. Jimmy always had the musical notes or the musical instruments or the glitter and the sequin and the piano keys and stuff because he was in music, right? I've had the yachting cap was a heat getter, but goddamn, I went through them. I would have needed to buy the factory to fucking keep doing that. It's just ridiculous because they tear up constantly unless you got a real one and then it'd be trashed in a month. But the suit, the wild colored suit from this rich mama's boy was my thing. And then Bobby was, that wild custom made stuff with the glittery bow ties as he got in the WWF. But it was all loud, but it leaned more to each of the individual.
Well, where do we go from here?
Did you hear about Bobby Caldwell?
I actually saw your tweet about it.
Can you believe that? Not only is he dead, ladies and gentlemen, but he was white.
Explain yourself, please.
Well, no, everybody on Twitter agreed with me. As a matter of fact, it's a guy, he was signed, come to find out, I read up on this a bit. He was signed by TK Records, which was a record company out of Miami that was started in the early 70s. And Harry Wayne Casey of KC and the Sunshine Band got a job there as a stock boy so that he could fucking use the recording studio at night. And he was the first big hit band on the label. And then they did a lot of disco. But TK Records, when that record was released by Bobby Caldwell, specifically tried to disguise the fact that he wasn't black because it was going up the charts on all of the R&B and soul and black radio stations. His picture was not on the cover of the album. And that was pre-MTV, and he never had another hit. So a lot of people, when they fucking announced he had died and they see a clip of him, are like, fuck, he's fucking white. You could put George Benson in there. You could put fucking Lou Rawls. I mean, the goddamn, it's impeccable and timeless and a soul classic out of nowhere. Cinderella Story never had another hit and apparently has been performing that ever since because the clip I saw of him was like from 5 years ago. He's still singing that song. What you won't do for love. You've tried everything and you won't give up. In my world.
Oh, come on. I'm sick. I'm not feeling good.
Made me do for love what I would not do. My friends wonder what is wrong with me.
What is wrong with you?
What a classic. Bobby Caldwell, 71 years old, and was only 10 years older than me, for heaven's sake. The biggest regret of my teenage years, one of them at least. What was it, 1979? What You Won't Do for Love. I think it was Valentine's Day season, and they released, because back then the only way that you could purchase music and have it in your own home was to go to the record store and buy either a record or a cassette tape or an 8-track if you're going to play it in the car. But there was no streaming, no downloading, there were no CDs. There's that most people, almost all people, didn't have a home video cassette recorder in Valentine's Day 1979. So I go to the mall, and I'm looking at the record store, and this was back when, well, in 1982, I was going to Pop Tunes in Memphis on the way to the Coliseum shows and getting 45 singles, not the number, 45 RPM singles. You know what I'm talking about, Brian. 45 RPM singles with the hit on the front and a fucking album cut on the back, the B-side, for either 99 cents or $1.99, depending on their vintage. And there in the record store is a single of What You Won't Do for Love by Bobby Caldwell, printed on heart-shaped red vinyl. And you could just sit there and watch it go around the demo turntable they had. And it was heart-shaped, but the grooves obviously weren't. And it was bright blood red. And I said, I want that. Boy, that's even cooler than the Jesse Ventura 12-inch single picture sleeve, right? And it was $8. And I wrestled with my conscience and could not justify in 1979 spending $8 on a single and didn't get it, and then felt bad about it and went back the next week and they had sold him out already and I never got it. And now he's dead. So see?
See what?
Well, don't you see?
I don't see. I don't know what you see.
Well, that shows you. It teaches you a lesson.
If you had bought the heart-shaped record, he'd still be here?
Well, that's possible.
Is that the point you were? I don't know what the point was that you're trying to make.
Well, Brian, I'm sorry, but you're on drugs. It affects your cognitive thinking. So
why did you not want to spend the $8? It sounds like it was a pretty cool record.
Because it was a single.
But it was a special.
That was more than some albums were. Most albums were at that period of time. And I, even though I was living frivolously, because I was making all that cool, sweet picture money from the Louisville Gardens and Gong Magazine and Bill Apter and all that type of thing, I still wasn't just going to go just insane. I was saving up for my VCR that fucking December, which cost $1,000. $8.
Oh, that $8 would have definitely derailed the VCR.
Well, it could have upset all my plans. Some of that Memphis wrestling might not exist to this day if it wasn't for that purchase.
How much were the first blank tapes you purchased for the VHS?
$25 a piece for a. Now they had just. Well, no, hold on. The VHSs were 25. Originally, you could only get them either downtown at Sun Television, I think, or out at the mall at the Magnavox store. But they were $25, but they had just recently come out with the 4-hour speed on VHS, because normally they were just 2 hours. And then about a year later or so, they came out with a 6-hour speed. So you could get 2, 4, or 6 hours out of the same tape.
Were you told initially, was it common knowledge right away from the jump that if you went to 4-hour or 6-hour speed that the quality would drop? Did you have to learn that, or was that?
No, it was in the materials. You will experience somewhat decreased picture quality in the slower speed, was I think how they described it. But yeah, that was, you could kind of figure that also intuitively. But the problem was, again, what's $25 in plus 5% tax in 1979? What is that today? So the point is, I started using, except for really special stuff, I started using
$103 today.
Okay, I started using the 4-hour speed, because that would have been literally $200 a month on blank videotape just to fucking tape the wrestling show. So, but then within a year and a half, then you find the wholesale places in New York that you can mail order a carton of 10 or 12, and you get them for like $10 a piece that way. And 6-hour speed came in for the everyday stuff. And then beta, as you mentioned, was what you would record on if you really wanted something to be in high quality, because the picture quality was much better on beta. And those tapes may be $1 or $2 different by that point.
Well, Jim, before we get going too much further, and we have a lot to talk about today.
I thought we were almost done.
Yeah, we've been going a while, but to go back to what we talked about earlier, and all kidding aside, whether you are a listener of this show who loves what we do, or whether you're just one of the people that tunes in to hate listen, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people going through a lot of things. And sometimes when people lash out and send angry notes. The reality is they may be unhappy. They may be lonely. They may not have someone to speak to. And again, whether you are someone who loves what we do or someone who doesn't like what we do, it doesn't matter. You may need someone to talk to, and we, of course, have someone you can talk to.
Yes, we do. And that was a very professional segue into a serious subject. And we've been talking about this, and a lot of people have misinterpreted my comments again when I said some people may not be cut out to be public figures. It doesn't mean in a perfect world, everybody wouldn't be great at everything they do, and every person wouldn't be nice about it to them, and et cetera, but the world ain't perfect. And some you can beat yourself up about stuff and dwell on it and fester, and it can manifest itself, or you can talk to somebody, and not somebody on Twitter, but like real people. This particular show, as we've mentioned many times, and this episode as well, is sponsored by BetterHelp. And they're licensed professional therapists that you can contact and to have a sounding board or to bounce stuff off of, to give you another viewpoint or a suggestion or a comment on something that might be, bothering you. I mean, they give you the classic, big words of therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding. But a journey of self-discovery, basically, it's a little help, a little assistance in figuring things out from people that have experience talking to people about their problems. We're not saying that this is going to be gospel, as they say, but it might be helpful in learning some positive skills about how to deal with some of these things instead of just festering on it yourself. So nevertheless, or getting on Twitter about it, because I don't think that will help anybody. So folks, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. They're flexible. You can suit it to your schedule. You go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com, and fill out a brief questionnaire, and then they'll match you up with a licensed therapist. You can switch those at any time you want. There's no additional charge for that. But if you go to betterhelp.com/JCE, you'll get 10% off your first month's services. betterhelp.com/JCE, 10% off your first month's services. If you need someone to talk to, I know we talk to you a lot, but there's not as much give and take live spontaneously in the moment. We have to read your emails. You can actually talk to these people because they exist in the world as you're speaking to them.
That's right, BetterHelp, and we encourage anyone who's listening to this show who feels like they need someone to talk to. There's no reason not to do it. Find that person, and of course find it with BetterHelp. But Jim, let's go from BetterHelp to what some fans may call better times. This week, WWE Rivals on A&E reviewed an interesting feud. I'm actually curious how much of this you initially saw. Triple H and Batista.
Well, and actually, since I told you to call it on the fly here, let me find my notes on the Triple H and Batista. There they are. See? I got them right here.
Oh, I see.
So the answer to your question is almost none of this. Here's the thing. I believe they, obviously in 2002, Batista made his debut as the deacon of Devon's, or was Devon the deacon and he was the box carrier, or Deacon Batista for Reverend Devon, or
That's
whatever
what it was,
the fuck.
I think, yeah.
All right. That's around the time that I started checking out of watching WWE programming, to be quite honest with you, because I was involved with OVW business every day, and I finally started making Thursday the day after the TV taping, where sometimes I wouldn't get back home till midnight, 1, 2 in the morning or whatever, if we were doing a big show coming up and a lot of post-production, whatever. So I would sleep late, and I'd have Thursday as my non-wrestling day. And Thursday was SmackDown in those days. I'd record it, but I'd never have time to watch it because 6 other days of the week I was goddamn busy with OVW. And also between Batista becoming a deacon and all of the other crummy gimmicks that they were starting to give the guys, it just pissed me off anyway. So as a result, from about 2003-ish to when did we start watching this shit? When, like 4 years ago.
You mean Rivals?
No, I don't mean Rivals. I mean all of the modern wrestling. When when Tony Khan decided he's going to get in the wrestling business, and we were watching the WWF big shows there, the big shows anyway, and we started paying a little more attention to them about 4 years ago. Between 2003 and 2018, I only watched whatever the fuck I was doing. Like when after OVW, when I was working a little bit for Ring of Honor, but most of TNA, I saw TNA, tried to keep up with Ring of Honor. And then after TNA, I saw Ring of Honor for about 3 years. And then I didn't watch any shit at all for about 3 years. And then here we are. So I didn't see a lot of this first time around. And also, I said that was about the time that they had hired a couple of writers before, but that's about the time that the whole thing became like 25 writers in the WWE at least. And yeah, it gave me gas. So anyway, I did enjoy, again, the seeing the brief old footage. They had Kane against Leviathan when Batista was Leviathan at the Gardens in OVW, and Kane was talking about he came in to work with him. But he forgets he came in twice. Do you know the other one?
Russ McCullough?
No, I said he came in twice to wrestle. I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. He came in twice to wrestle Leviathan, Batista.
Oh, no, I don't know the second one.
Believe it or not, and this is great, I've got a poster in my office. The main event of there's a casino in Rising Sun, Indiana. And Les Thatcher, then the HWA, sold a show there and had some of our guys come up, and he got some guys from the office, and it ended up the main event at this little bitty teeny casino show in Rising Sun, Indiana in like 2001 was Kane versus Batista. But it didn't draw like that because nobody fucking knew who the fuck Batista was in 2001. And actually in Rising Sun, Indiana, Kane was a big deal, but there was only like 1,000 people in the whole fucking town to begin with. But anyway, so it was twice they wrestled. Triple H saying he was a sponge, he was always hungry and wanted to learn, he wanted it. This is the exact opposite of what all of our impressions were of him in OVW as a guy who sat in the corner, was kind of meek, didn't want to speak up, and waited to be told what to do. And I'm wondering if when he got up there and they fucking put a suit jacket on him with no sleeves and had him carrying a box around his neck, if it was made clear to him that, Jesus Christ, if you don't do something, you're going to be out of here. And that's when it's well known and it's been documented. He started working out with and having close relationship with Triple H. But we saw the athletic ability and the fact that he was nimble. He could do the spine buster and bounce up and the spear, and look at that physique and the goddamn face and the fucking tattoos is enough. There is an opponent there for Undertaker, for Big Show at the time, for the pollen alert here in Louisville because of the unseasonably screwy weather. But no, for Undertaker, for Kane, for Big Show, for all of the giants, for, we didn't really know at that point when we first got him that Steve Austin was, his days in the business were numbered. But The Rock was still active. So, you see a guy that looks like that, And you say, okay, yes, but as I've mentioned before, already past 30, right? Well, we figured out his age before, but this was 2000 and 2001, so he was past 30, somewhat injury prone and not a natural worker. How do we get, probably brief but hopefully spectacular career of him, being an opponent on pay-per-view for all these giant monsters that the WWF has?
He was born in 69.
Okay, so when we got him, he was 32. Yeah. So anyway.
Was he the oldest person you guys
were sent? Rico.
Oh, that's right. Rico Constantino, of course.
Rico was like either 38 or 39 and looked like he was 25.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, I'm just saying that with Batista, that was the thing that we had is he didn't seem, I don't want to say, he was just a quiet guy, soft-spoken guy. He was the farthest thing you'd think from a movie star. I had, Stacey, I had dinner with him and his wife one time at the Tumbleweed down the road from the Davis Arena, I think it was. And he was just like, you couldn't barely hear him over the booth, the table. And he would sit in the corner and, he was always got the hoodie on and the fucking sweatshirt because he's cold. And like when I mentioned the Rising Sun Casino match. Here's Kane. I think that one was even before we did the one at the Gardens. I can't remember for sure. But there's Glenn Jacobs sitting down in front of him. And the reason why that we had booked it was so that same reason why I booked Undertaker to wrestle Glenn Jacobs in Knoxville, 5 years before that. Audition a potential opponent. And, there was Dave Batista was going, oh, whatever you want to do. And I was like, tell him what you can do. You do the spear, you do the spine buster. You hear Glenn, here's his gimmick, kind of blah, blah, blah. And so, somewhere between us smashing him over in OVW and then him going up there and getting completely stripped of the whole gimmick and everything attractive about him and being made a manservant, was he either figured out be more assertive, take more charge of things, and also who to start working out in the gym with. Because, but I guess that's, hold that thought. That's why I'm saying when Batista acts like Triple H, he said he was the first one to see something in him. What the fuck? I'm not even talking about just me. And that's why they signed him at past 30, because look at him. Everybody saw something in him. And I saw that's why he was the most undefeated, most put over OVW champion and top fucking heel of all time with an invincible gimmick that he sold nothing. Because we all had Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard. Everybody saw, okay, this guy's going to be a guy that fucking works with our big guys or he ain't going to work out at all. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. But in the past, and I don't have any direct quotes here, but I think Batista's been one of the guys, and maybe even Triple H speaking on his behalf, to almost not necessarily put down the OVW training system, but the way he was trained specifically. So when you look at the way he was used eventually, once he got in with Triple H, put in with Evolution, they had plans for him. What do you think is fair? What do you think is unfair about the criticism that you or Danny Davis or OVW as a whole have received at times in the past about the training or the management of Leviathan or Batista?
Okay,
preparing him for the main roster.
Okay. I think he did great as Batista once they started pushing him. Like I said, the Deacon thing didn't work out too well. But when they put him in Evolution and they grouped him together with Triple H, Flair, and Orton, and then Triple H grooms him, and that was the whole story of this Rivals episode, grooms him to be the guy to break out of that group and have the rivalry with, and is probably the only guy that Triple H really put over, not once, but 2 or 3 times in a row. We'll check the notes here in a second. At that time period to get him over, it was a hot deal, yes. So I'm not saying that he had to be Leviathan or nothing. What I was saying was we gave the guy who had had a dozen matches, maybe. As soon as he got here, he got hurt and he had to sit out for 3 months. He tore some kind of arm muscle, had to have surgery. He's already past 30 and he looks like that. So we gave him a gimmick to work with Undertaker or Kane or Big Show or whatever the fuck, if they wanted to use it, and they never said they were going to, and they didn't have to. But I couldn't get this green fucking guy over, even to my local people, just as here's Dave Batista, folks, because he was a meek, mild, he wasn't a movie star. As I said, you barely knew he was in the locker room. And it was his ex-wife, unfortunately, his ex-wife, she passed away. She had a illness. But at the time, he was just a little homebody character that didn't stand out in the way of personality. And so in that case, make his visual look the fucking, and his size the story. Because he can't talk. And he doesn't really have a lot of personality. Now, later on, 3 years later, suddenly he decides to become a fucking movie star and he's dating all kinds of women and he's fucking, buying all these expensive cars. That wasn't the Dave Batista that we got in Louisville in 2000.
One thing they did not mention, or if they did, I missed it, but I don't think they mentioned it in the special. What do you remember about Mark Jindrak? Because wasn't he originally in Evolution before they decided to go with Batista instead? They shot vignettes with him and Randy Orton and Flair and Triple H.
And that was Laurinaitis was just getting started having some kind of influence there because for whatever reason, Laurinaitis, I guess because they were in WCW together, Laurinaitis loved Sean O'Haire and Mark Jindrak. And Sean O'Haire, yes, did have the physique and athletic ability that you would have thought, but the problem was he didn't get it mentally and had issues. And he had that one really good, oh God damn it, where he was like the devil speaking on your shoulder. What was the gimmick? I can't remember. He did vignettes for people overlooked. They were like 10-second video clips or audio clips of him put together. He couldn't do that promo. To give him 2 minutes in front of a microphone, he'd be off in the fucking field. And Jindrak was he was another guy. He had athletic ability for his size, but I think Laurinaitis saw a kindred spirit because he had no real physique and no real personality and it was just bleh. So they swapped Jindrak out and put Batista in, who had the bigger upside because of his look. But what was your question?
Well, that was kind of my question, just what you remembered about that. Because again, originally they didn't go with Batista. Originally they thought, they never mentioned that here. It was always like, we thought this is the guy. Yeah. But originally they thought someone else was the guy.
Well, see, Jindrak should have spent more time in the gym at Stamford with Triple H. But
what did you think about the idea of Batista being put with Randy Orton with Flair and Triple H? Just because you had both of those guys. Did you ever see them meshing well together like this?
Well, yeah, because, again, the Four Horsemen were completely separate individuals, but they looked good together and they looked like they would hang out together. And with Flair in the group, you're going to have an Orton because they're, it's public knowledge among pretty much every wrestling fan that Orton's father, Bob Orton Jr. and Flair have had a long history and been friends, blah, blah, blah. That kind of fits. And Triple H has aligned himself as a student and a, devotee of Ric Flair. But then you've got the muscle. It's almost like they got there's the Luger of the Horsemen. Look at that fucking body. He's green, but he's got 6 things he can do fucking great. And look at him. Did we mention look at him? And then once that I can't say we ever gave him Leviathan promos because the problem is his voice never matched up to that gimmick or what you would create in your mind, right? Because he's just a normal guy. But when he's got hair or some kind of hair and he's wearing a suit and, stylish clothing and sunglasses, okay, he can kind of have a normal voice. And then he actually kind of got some fucking personality. But if you'd have said to anybody in the OVW locker room at the time, you think Batista'd ever be the life of the party? I mean, what? It was a change in personality in a short period of time. Maybe it was the big paychecks that started coming in.
That'll do it.
But anyway, that again, they had him in the group, and then finally he's the one's had all I can stands, can't stands no more, and says no to Triple H, and goes into the 2005 Rumble and wins it. And I love seeing this footage because, again, we see the stuff from the 90s Attitude Era and say, gosh, it looks so much better than today. But this stuff was still looking better than today. It gets more recent. But then, of course, he picks Triple H to face for the title at WrestleMania. And, after Triple H had thought that he had him hoodwinked and everything, and one power bomb through a fucking table in 2005 could draw millions of dollars for the main event at WrestleMania. And now a power bomb through a table is segments 3, 6, and 8.
You know what? They left a big thing out of this documentary, though, and it didn't tell the whole story because of it. They all made a big deal out of, before the power bomb, Batista gave the thumbs up and switched it to thumbs down. Flair's face turned and Triple H was scared. The whole reason why that meant something was, what was it, a year earlier or so? When Randy Orton got the belt. Remember? He was on Batista's shoulders, and Flair and Triple H gave him the thumbs up. They turned it to thumbs down because he got the belt instead of Triple H. Batista dropped him. That's when they turned Randy Orton babyface and Evolution turned on him. So,
well, see there,
that established the thumbs up spot as meaning something. They needed to point that out here.
Well, if I were you, I would write a stern letter to the WWE offices.
I'm going to write it to Freddie Prinze and his investigators and say, hey, you guys did a bad job here.
There you go. When they're in the forensic lab there that they're doing those cutaways in. So anyway, they do good promos back and forth. They have the WrestleMania 2005 match. Batista wins. And then the next pay-per-view rematch, Batista wins. And then Hell in a Cell that summer, Batista wins. And Triple H was bleeding in every match. And Batista goes 3-0 again. Yes, I would think at that point he would be over. Because has anybody ever done that to Triple H in history before?
I don't know.
Or after.
And again, that came off a period of time where, for a few years, certain fans, were getting sick of Triple H because he was going over everyone and putting them down in promos, not selling any insults directed at him. He was the cool heel that fans didn't necessarily take as the cool heel. See, the thing is, Triple H needed Ric Flair in a way more than Flair needed Triple H. Now, Flair needed Triple H, but Triple H needed that credibility because he was a guy that was pushed at times beyond where fans wanted him, and they were still trying to find a way to make that all work.
But boy, howdy, when he decided he was going to make somebody, he made him. And it just so happens the guy was bigger and had a stronger, better body, but also would be beholden to him. And again, then they were apart for a few years, and then Batista said, fuck it, and quit the business. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm happy now he's a big movie star. But I was right. When we saw him in OVW, I said, if we can get 5 years or so out of this guy at the top, then that's what we should be shooting for, because he's either going to get hurt, or at the time, I was not necessarily convinced that he was sold on making this his life's work. And that's what, remember, we said, we had somebody write in and do the math for us and email it to us that he was there for 7 years, but if you take out the 2 injury time offs or whatever, that he had a 5-year career. Okay, I was like 3 or 4 months off or whatever. And that's fine because now he's a movie star. So I don't want anybody fucking persecuting me because I've run him off of Twitter. But anyway, and then he went Hollywood and he wanted to have one last match with Triple H, and that's, they did it on the SmackDown 1000, the reunion, and he makes a little swipe at Triple H, and they, oh my God, they showed the footage from the Saudi Arabia. Was that the Saudi Arabia show before we started watching any of this stuff, the last one? Because
it may have been 2018. One of the first ones.
It was 5 years ago. I don't remember ever seeing Shawn Michaels bald. Where they did Taker and Kane against Triple H and Michaels was completely shaved bald there. I was like, oh my fuck. But it was, so Triple H tears his pec, and now will he make Mania to fight Batista, who I thought was the fucking injury prone one. But finally they set it up, and Triple H finally won, so that they could all hug and kiss and Batista can retire in peace. So that it was a heartwarming ending to this long-running 5-year career he fucking had. The 9-month rivalry in his 5-year career that everybody remembers. Well, I don't mean to be condescending.
Well, that was WWE Rivals. Batista versus Triple H, condescending or not, that's what it was. But on the topic, real quick before we move on, because I think I saw something earlier today that he may not go in this year, but there were rumors that Batista would go into the WWE Hall of Fame this year. 2 names that were announced, Rey Mysterio Jr. and the Great Muta. I'd like to get your thoughts first on Rey Mysterio Jr. going into the Hall of Fame.
Well, and hold on now, Cowboy. Don't bury the lead. Batista technically is in the Hall of Fame, but he's not been inducted in person, right? Because didn't they do something I saw during the pandemic where there were no people, but they named some names? But he still hasn't had an official in-person type of thing. Something's going on there. Somebody can write in and tell me, like, I give a shit, more about that. Having said that, Rey Mysterio, I think, is perfect. And again, he's still wrestling. But, they haven't been hard and fast with that rule. Usually, a guy's retired. But at the same time, this fits not only, we've talked about they have actual quotas and or, different minorities, ethnic groups, genders, whatever, have to have representation. So this fills a main event guy and at least Hispanic minority at the same time. But Rey Mysterio, yes, he's been there for so long. He's had such a great career there, and everybody likes him personally. Muta for any wrestling Hall of Fame, yes, but it's fucking hilarious. He never worked there once. And I mean, I don't know, where does that come from? Just somebody noted he just had his retirement match in Japan and thought, well, now would be the time. I don't know. I didn't know he had any relationship with the WWF or WWE, unless they're trying to. What company is he most beholden to or affiliated with or involved with in Japan?
Pro Wrestling Noah.
Would you think WWE'd be trying to do something with them?
I think WWE's always interested in doing something in Japan, and you never know if any of these things, like Jushin Liger went in a few years ago, you never know if they're strategic or if it's just arbitrary.
Yeah.
You really don't know. With Muta, I read a funny comment that I had to tell you because it made me laugh. Flair announced it. I guess Flair was on one of their online shows, and he did the official announcement that Muta is going to be in the Hall of Fame. He may even be inducting him, I'm not sure. But I read a comment that said, Muta should turn down Ric Flair for the booking of Starrcade 89. He should refuse to allow Flair to induct him. And that did make me laugh.
Muta, I did my best to plead your case and Doom's too, but son of a gun. But anyway, Muta is for any wrestling Hall of Fame, but it's odd from the WWE since he never appeared for them, and maybe it's some kind of strategic, as you said, they're all about the strategic stuff these days in the WWE. Well, hell, they might be sold by the fucking time Muta gets inducted. You never know. Nick Khan's out there with a fucking sandwich sign on the interstate.
Well, they did say that they are accepting bids or the first round of bids in April. And I told you, if I was WWE, I'm bringing anyone who's interested to Mania. That's where I want them to see the whole thing.
I'm wanting to get the guy, Dan, the auctioneer on Storage Wars. I'm wanting him to do the auction, though. When they gather them all around.
Auction?
Yeah, when they gather them all around the ring at WrestleMania in the stadium and everybody's car trunk is open and they're fucking... Yeah, sing, baby. Do I hear 9 billion? 9 billion, 9 billion 1. Do I hear 9 billion 1? That type of thing. It'll be fun.
Well, we shall see what happens, but that was WWE's Hall of Fame, at least who they've announced so far. We'll see who they announce. We're just a few weeks from Mania. They still only announced 2 names.
They don't have to sell any tickets this year, right? They're just doing it right after SmackDown. So it's there's no big... I'm not saying there's no big name, but there's not like the traditional main event names advertised way early to sell tickets, etc., as there was for a number of years.
But still, you would want to build up anticipation, I would think, or at least let people know that certain former greats will be in attendance or around. That they don't even announce. Again, we're a couple weeks away. They just announced Rey Mysterio and Muta, and Mysterio was already going to be there.
I'm not going to argue with you. I think they should. I'm just saying, apparently that's what they're thinking because like, yeah.
You think The Undertaker's going in this year?
No. What?
Do you think The Undertaker is going in this year?
I thought he already went in. Did he go in last year?
Oh, he did. I guess he did. Well,
what the fuck are you doing? You're on drugs.
I'm on drugs, and it's the WWE Hall of Fame, so who gives a shit?
Well, that's why you just fucking said that to me like that. And I thought, well, now I've got a goddamn brain tumor.
I don't have a brain tumor.
Well, what did you hear? You?
Have you heard something?
Well, I'm telling you, I don't want to get you all stirred up and everything, but I had a cousin.
I knew someone years ago that was at an award show. It was him and his business partner and a celebrity and the celebrity's agent. And the celebrity was kind of going down the line, talking to different media members and doing photos. And the guy I knew turned to the agent and said, "Hey, your client's leaving you." And the agent said, "Oh, what did you hear?" But Jim, before we go too much further, this show so far has been a mixed bag, not necessarily awesome, but we can guarantee a box of awesome that can be delivered to all the listeners today.
Well, you certainly can. And that is one of the happiest times of the month. One of the most joyous times of the month is when your monthly box arrives and is spilled open with all the awesomeness, courtesy of the folks at boxofawesome.com and our friends at Bespoke Post, as you mentioned, because, folks, by now you know what the deal is. They have literally hundreds, and I'm talking a plethora, a cornucopia of items that they have hand-curated, specially picked from different small businesses across the country to fit a variety of interests. And you go online to boxofawesome.com and you pick out these various things that you are interested in. And every month they release new boxes across a ton of these different categories. And each box will come to you and that will be full of awesomeness from a small and up and coming brand that you are interested in. It's free to sign up. You can skip a month. You can cancel anytime. But besides the fact that I thought they were a little knife heavy, I thought maybe somehow Jack the Ripper was involved with this company.
Oh, come on.
But, well, they got a lot of knives, but they're cool knives.
They're
but they
great
got a lot
knives.
of knives.
I like their knives.
Well, see there, and you're that kind of person.
I am.
Hiding behind a park bench with a knife in your pocket.
I'm not that kind of person. I'm the kind of person that can appreciate a good knife.
Well, yes, while you're hiding behind
not hiding, and I'm not in hiding. There's no hiding involved in this.
All right, loitering then. Nevertheless, they've also got what I got, the Weekender, a jaunty travel bag, festooned and patterned after one of the old stonemason's tool bags that they carry. And Stacy immediately appropriated that for her painting supplies. But the Weekender bag, the metal hardware, the reinforced frame, the quality leather straps, never going to have any problem with this thing falling apart or wearing out. But they've got all kinds of stuff. They've got the hot sauces from small brands all over the country, Texas, Nevada, California. They've got Black Swan Cooperage, a father-daughter duo located in the heart of the Minnesota North Woods, have come up with hand-blown crystal glass. And there's a knife and a slash box. I don't know what's going on with those people. But there's all kinds of cool things here from a variety of small and exotic companies that would love to show you their wares. But they're all from around this country. You don't have to worry about having any outer space spores come in and invade your home. It's just spores from the United States of America.
It's actually a great way to support small businesses here in America.
Yes, even tiny businesses, you're squeezing their head. Each box is valued at around 70. What's the matter?
I don't know where. Sometimes I don't know where these things come from. But go ahead, please.
Well, it's a teeny tiny business. They can barely stay afloat. You know, if you buy one of these boxes, it could be the difference between somebody's kids eating or starving. When you think about it, or the way things are these days, they've got to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And you can get bootstraps on here, too. A whole box of bootstraps from a goddamn... And well, here, also, they've got barbecue rub. In the carnivore box, the American barbecue rub is made by the Great American Spice Company in Rockford, Michigan. I understand they're descended from a family of Swedish immigrants that came over long ago with no pigmentation.
What?
Yeah, in Rockford, Michigan.
I don't know about that, but what do you think? You love barbecue. Is a good barbecue rub important?
A good barbecue rub is very important, especially if you've eaten a lot of barbecue. You get rubbed afterwards, you'll sleep like a baby. Folks, each box is valued at around $70, but you're only paying a fraction of that because Box of Awesome pretty much shoplifted all this stuff from these
no, they
small
didn't.
businesses. And
They've
just
made
throw it
one.
in these.
No.
That's why it comes in a plain brown wrapper, and you have to unbox this stuff in the privacy of your own home. Don't do it out in front of the neighbors. Then they have proof you've accepted potentially hot merchandise.
You have not accepted any hot merchandise. This is all legitimately purchased or worked with these small companies. Everything's legitimate. You can open it in front of your house, in front of the neighbors. Make them jealous.
Well, it just depends on what kind of box you pick is what you're interested in, is whether you can open that box in front of the neighbors. Have you seen all your neighbors' boxes? I know some of your neighbors, you've seen their box, but have you seen the box of every neighbor you have?
Let's talk about these fine knives.
All right, so you go to boxofawesome.com and enter the code DRIVE at checkout. 20% off your first box, whether it's the neighbor's box or not. Boxofawesome.com. Enter the code DRIVE. You're going to get 20% off your first box, which is already priced at a fraction of its value. You get 20% off more of that. Pretty much they're going to be sending you some kind of fucking currency in the mail, I guess. They're paying you to take this stuff. But if I were you, if they send you any currency in your Box of Awesome, I'd use one of those pins on it. Check out first, just before you try to spend it.
They don't send
Legal
currency,
purpose.
but everything they send is legitimate, and you have nothing to worry about.
Well, they may, if you're interested in motion pictures, maybe they'll send you a box of that motion picture money that they make that looks confusingly similar to, but not quite like American currency, and is used in the movies.
That is an interesting idea, although I do not think that is on the menu from Bespoke Post.
Well, what if you want it? Write in and ask them, folks. Boxofawesome.com, code DRIVE, get 20% off, buy some shit, and then say, hey, start selling phony money on here, too.
Well, don't say that, but do let us know what you get. If you end up going to Bespoke Post and getting a Box of Awesome, we'd love to know what is in your Box of Awesome, so check in with us on Twitter or via email.
That's right, and if you can, ladies and gentlemen, especially the ladies, send us a picture of your box.
Will you stop it?
So we can see it.
Be nice.
And see what you've got in your box.
The Box of Awesome that arrives at your house, yes, we'd like to see what is in that.
I've known several people that had awesome boxes I wanted to see inside of. And now you can.
From Bespoke Post and Box of Awesome. What's that link one more time, Jim?
That's boxofawesome.com with the promo code DRIVE for 20% off. Enter that code DRIVE at checkout. 20% off.
Box of Awesome. Well, Jim, from Box of Awesome, let's get some more wrestling talk here on the show. And I know you watched some Monday Night Raw. Before we get to that review, let me get a few questions in here.
Sure. Brian, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Pete Kinnan in Inverness, Scotland. With the advent of smartphones, and therefore the lack of crowd using flash photography, has it taken away some of the spectacle of big moments? Not exclusively finishers, but when something big happened, it always seemed a big deal with flashes going off. Savage's elbow, for example.
You know, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. We've missed that now because nobody has a camera anymore. They've all got the phones. And the phones make light, but only when Bray Wyatt comes out. And that's because they're looking for their car keys, trying to figure out how to get out and beat the traffic. So yes, it does, because in all the old footage, you see the big move or the big reveal or the big whatever, and flash, 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 flash all over the place. Even back in the day with the Kodak Instamatic cameras, they were flash, 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 just not as bright.
Do you think you lose something in big moments?
Well, yeah, it adds to the, as he said, to the spectacle. It adds to the kind of the visual of the thing. It was like natural pyro that didn't fucking give you hearing damage.
All right, so I guess that's the answer to that question.
So I'm in favor of it. Yeah. Well, I mean, do you want me to go out and rig some fucking flashlights? What do you want me to do? Fucking Dungeness Crab from Inverness, Scotland, whatever his fucking name was.
His name was Pete Kinnan, and that was his question. He's a member of the Cult of Cornette.
Well, good for him.
Jim, you brought up Bray Wyatt. There have been different stories over the last week that either he is injured and off Mania and off everything going forward, or there have been creative differences and the match with Lashley at Mania is now off, coming off Brock Lesnar turning down working with Bray Wyatt. Any thoughts on whatever it is that's happening right now with Bray Wyatt and him and his character not being on TV?
Well, when we first heard the challenge for the winner of Brock and Lashley, we were like, wow, how the fuck, especially with Brock, and obviously I think Brock realized, no, he could not be Brock Lesnar against this fucking guy. To be wrapped up in all of that, to be interacting with puppets, or to be scared of, the dark or whatever. There's no way you could make that work without hurting Brock Lesnar. He's not going to let that happen. So they've obviously, I don't know how it got to the point where they aired that challenge, because usually Brock's stuff is pretty well laid out in advance, one would think, or how it got to that point, or he said no and they didn't believe him. And then he said, no, not no, but no. So he kicked Lashley in the balls, but it wasn't going to work with Brock. With Lashley, I mean, we've seen that, it wasn't doing him any good. So now I don't want to knock the guy for creative differences or whatever. If he really is injured, is the story of his injury a cover to cover up for a bunch of people not wanting to work with him? Or creative differences. I don't understand how that he could have creative differences with anybody on the creative team when somebody explained to me the creative they've been doing so far. How do you know it's different? How do you know you're disagreeing with it? What is he doing? That's what we've said. I'd love to see the pitch meeting. Or are they just telling a video editor, make some of this shit up and we'll show it? Or is this idea his and he's instructing them what to do? Or how does he tell the people that actually write the format? Well, I'm going to come out and tell this fucking never-ending story that never gets to a point and just turn the lights out when I tell you. I don't know. I think they've got themselves in a point now. When he came out the first couple of weeks, remember, I said, my God, this guy can talk. He's like a blackjack mulligan. He can hold them in the palm of his hand. But then he not only never gets to the punchline of what he's trying to tell them, but he's already degenerated into fucking Twilight Zone. So maybe they're just putting pause on him until they can figure out how to fucking channel this thing into something that makes sense. I don't know.
What do you do if you have someone and no one wants to work with them?
Well, I mean, there's always going to be somebody that you can instruct. Hey, work with this guy, job guy. It's not that you can't find anybody for him to wrestle, but anybody meaningful, anybody in a main event, anybody that justifies his salary and alleged, worth value on the card, that might be tough because it's death to them. And why would you want to do that if you were a big star?
Bray Wyatt was released a few years ago. He was making a lot of money. They were using him, doing all the fantastical stuff he wants to do and that they wanted to do. They let him go. They brought him back. They needed main event guys. Like you said, the first few weeks, people reacted to it. I didn't like it, but people were giving it a chance. Here we are today. Has it been worth it? Has it made any positive? I don't think you can even ask that question. Has it been worth it bringing this guy back to the company and putting him in, slotting him into the position they've used him in? Has any of that to this point been worth it?
I don't see how.
For that money that we're assuming that he's getting.
Yeah, because I don't know what he's done. Besides be there. He's there. And all the puppets are there. Archie's there. Betty's there. Veronica too.
Oh, come on.
But what has he done? And who's Captain Howdy and what has he done or what is he going to do or what do they ever do? And whose side Bray Wyatt and Captain Howdy are on each other's side until they beat each other up and then they both disappear. I don't understand.
If you don't have Bray Wyatt, do you still use the Uncle Howdy character just to give Lashley, whatever it is, a win on Mania against this guy or just to finish it up? Or again, we don't know exactly what's going on. We just know it hasn't been good.
Well, if Bray Wyatt can't wrestle Lashley in the match that's advertised, unless they come up with something completely involving somebody else that people might like, then it wouldn't hurt if Lashley just beats old Captain Howdy. But at least there's some kind of tie-in to what they've been doing, but that seems like kind of a letdown.
Yes, it does, but I think this entire Bray Wyatt run has been a letdown. Let me ask you another question.
Possibly
Jim.
This entire question has been a letdown, but we'll move on.
Jim, this next question was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Will in Illinois. If you were an aspiring wrestler in today's landscape, and you are seriously committed to making a living in this business, and you are also serious about not being associated or involved with anything like invisible men, invisible hand grenades, dance routines, etc., where would you draw the line in terms of what bookings you accept and when and where to speak out in objection to said BS? Just starting out, obviously you have pretty much zero leverage, and you may have to be careful as in regards to burning bridges with anyone. So do you just make sure that you personally don't allow yourself to be booked in any of the above hokey, embarrassing bullshit? Or do you go a step further and make sure that you don't appear on any shows or work for any promotions that are known for said bullshit? Or taking it further and say you won't work on any show that uses wrestlers who have done such BS in previous promotions? This third option would pretty much mean you could not work for AEW or WWE.
You couldn't work for anybody.
So maybe that would be too hard a line to draw. Still, I sympathize with anyone out there trying to chase their dreams in this crazy business without getting the modern stank on them.
See, that's the thing, is that especially guys that are starting out, they don't have to wholeheartedly, full-throatedly jump into this and just have the time of their lives while they're doing routines in slow motion. Ricky Morton actually told me that. It was several years ago now. At some fan fest, he said, I was in a match the other night. It was a 6-man tag or whatever, and they said, watch what we're going to do. And they started running a spot in slow motion. And he's standing there looking at them like they have turds hanging out of their mouth, and they were like, oh, wasn't this great? Obviously, you don't ever have to go that far or, volunteer to work with the Invisible Man or whatever the case. But the sad fact is, especially guys starting out that don't have any leverage because they're not stars, they're not names. They wouldn't necessarily be, they might be talents, but they might not be recognized as such. And they might not be more important on the card as somebody else. Has to do what they or work where they have to work these days. That's why, much less the embarrassment of you go out and fit all those criteria. You're serious and you got talent and you want to do good and be a star of the business, and you have to go out and follow, the fat fucking 40-year-old clown that's, running the show, or the goddamn 62-pound children that did the trampoline routine, or the Invisible Man, or whatever the case. And it's sad, but that's unfortunately, it was several years ago when I was still doing, dates that I would have to ask even people I knew, who was the only people I was really working for, still is the Invisible Man going to be booked? Is everybody going to be serious there? Is there going to be teleportation? And, but unfortunately, that's the way it is. And, I fault the guys for doing, or anybody for doing shit with blow-up dolls and underage children and the Invisible Man or teleporting to another dimension or whatever. But, honestly, sometimes you're going to have to, that's on national television. There's goddamn quality talent being forced to work with pockets. So, of course, on your local indie, there's going to be bullshit because almost nobody that runs a wrestling business anymore is in any way serious about it.
Is the problem the wrestlers or the promoters?
Both. The promoters who book it and allow it, and the wrestlers, the section of them that want to do the shit. And then the promoter, because chances are he's either one of the boys or wants to be, he'll let him do it because, oh, that's so funny.
Do you think if you were a promoter today, not necessarily you, but if you were a younger person who was into wrestling and somehow you became a promoter, do you think it would be a difficult task to tell these guys, I really don't want you to do that on my show?
Well, only if I was one of the promoters that was not paying them anything and they were doing it for free. Because if I was paying them, then it becomes a fucking different relationship. And then I tell them what they can or can't do. Even if it's $5. So at that point, see, that's another thing that happened when I took a few years away from goddamn wrestling and turned back around, and suddenly the booker's directions or the booker's instructions became the booker's suggestions. So no, it's not hard at all. If you're the promoter and you've run the show, you've rented the building, and you're paying the guys, they need to have the fucking match. If you say no juice, no juice. If you say no chairs or no fighting in the crowd, don't get my ass sued. Everybody in the ring has to be visible. Don't take bumps from the social distancing match where you're 6 feet away from the guy taking a bump for him. Fuck you. You won't get paid, and you'll never be back. Wrestle and have matches and finish them in approximately the time we ask you to, and the right guy needs to win. And then you will be paid and booked again. Fuck. It's the marks that are the promoters that are the bigger marks because they're the wrestlers now, and not all of them. There's the MJFs that are actually businessmen. But the wrestlers want to have the thrill of goddamn wrestling. And that's why they do that, so they can perform, because everybody can play. And the promoters, because they don't have the physical characteristics to wrestle, or they've got a little bit more money and they're bigger marks, they're the ones that put their own money into it to let their friends play at their expense. So I blame everybody.
Certainly, if you are someone who is seriously minded about professional wrestling, it can't be an easy time the last decade or so, but especially right now to break into the business because, like you said, where are you going to work? Who's promoting the independent shows that are serious that don't have goofy shit? There aren't too many.
Now, and then, unfortunately, there's the performance center if you're lucky enough to get signed to the WWE system, but then you learn one way in one place in one direction, and you don't get the opportunity of working an actual legitimate territory, or as we've talked about, the whole pecking order of things. And so yeah, I mean, there's no wonder most everybody sucks, because where are you going to go to fucking figure it out to begin with?
Jim, one more question before we get to Raw and your thoughts on Raw. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jason Lake, Aberdeen, Washington. I was wondering how much merch sales can change or direct the booking and help determine who the top guys and gals are. As I understand it, it used to be Gates, and I suppose that may still be a factor to a point, but with wrestling becoming more TV-oriented, I would think that Gates wouldn't be the ultimate determining factor. One recent example that may have been affected is the Acclaimed and the Guns. I really thought they were setting up Billy to turn on the Acclaimed. I thought, why would they paint him as such a terrible father without any redemption? But they did. They didn't screw the Acclaimed like I thought they were leading to. I could see all the Scissor Me Daddy ass merch being so hot that it changed the booking, and Billy wasn't the factor in the Acclaimed losing their titles. Then, they completely dropped all that absentee father narrative without Billy making any amends. I'm just curious as to how selling more t-shirts or what have you could help determine your spot. I'm sure it's why we see Danhausen on TV every week.
No, the example you just gave was just rotten booking. Because, yes, in this day and age, you can sell a ton of merchandise. Even if you're the offbeat, they say Pocket sells merchandise. I don't know. Definitely in my experience in the 80s, 90s with WCW, WWF, nobody was ever specific, except for Sable and Sonny. Nobody was ever specifically used more because they were selling a lot of merchandise, because generally the main event talent that was already being used anyway is the one who's selling all the merchandise. And then came Sonny and Sable because they never had pretty girls before, for the most part. Sherry, I'm sure, depending on whatever the merchandise business was at her era, did well also.
But I don't think there was any Sherry merch, at least.
Well, maybe there was something with her on T-shirts with, Savage or whatever the fuck. But point being, that was really Sonny and Sable and the T-shirts and the merchandise. That was why they had to get, especially Sable. Sonny had a reason to be there most times. Sable, they had to shoehorn in on, spots or whatever. But generally amongst the wrestling talent, the top sellers until modern times where people just get, the ironic bunch just gets a fucking bee up their bonnet that they want to buy the clown's T-shirt rather than the main events or the world champion or whoever. But again, I always think you have to look at, even if Pockets sells T-shirts, and the people that watch him, they're already sold on that kind of wrestling. They're going to be there. So do you trade the merchandise money for making your show look Bush League, low rent, comedic, jokey, indie, outlaw, whatever term you want to use, and hurting your talent like with Bray Wyatt? Do you hurt your talent by putting them with a guy that doesn't sell anything and they have to be scared of fucking fictitious puppets and you can burn him alive and not beat him? It buries the talent. Or do you put him in the ring with a guy who looks physically like shit, has no personality whatsoever, and treats the whole thing like a joke and doesn't try, in most part, to win to begin with? It makes the other talent look like shit. So you're balancing Bray Wyatt or Pocket's merchandise with making your show look low rent.
In the Smoky Mountain days, all the baby faces, well, most of the baby faces, if not all of them, had merch tables so that during the show, during intermission, whenever it may be, fans can meet the wrestlers, get photos with the wrestlers, buy stuff from the wrestlers.
Right.
If one of those guys, just could be random wrestler X, all of a sudden started having a massive line at their table and they were doing good merch business, is that something you would pay attention to and say, okay, I'm not pushing this person to the level that people are reacting to them at. I need to alter what I'm doing.
Well, yes, I would if it had ever happened. But the thing is, as I've said, there's Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, the Rock and Roll Express, and the line was, if we had a crowd, the line was as long as the fucking building. And there next to him, in many cases, was Lance Storm and Chris Jericho, 15 years younger, better looking, bigger bodies. And it looked like Lonely Virgil because Ricky and Robert had the personality and they were going to flirt with the girls and they were going to talk to them and they were going to make over them and they were going to give them a sales pitch. And that was part of it. And they're fucking meeting the fans, whereas Lance and Chris were both, embarrassed, timid, didn't know what to do or how to be personable because they were green. Bobby Blaze did better merchandise business than that because he didn't come from, a different climate and I'm not saying that as a joke in Canada, but a different wrestling climate where you didn't go out and hug the babies and kiss the girls and whatever the fuck. But no, generally and it was the same in Memphis. The picture sales were commensurate with your level on the card. The top guys were always the top sellers were the top guys. The medium sellers were the medium guys. And the bottom sellers were either at the top, the Bobby Fulton, the very first match, 1981, very first match, open card, Bobby Fulton. And then the most popular heel was right below the opening match babyface in terms of picture sales. Because you had to be a real fucking weirdo to want to buy a picture of a heel because they were heels. But that's the way it went. It wasn't like, in my experience and again, not until modern time when audiences got smart and decided to go in business for themselves and they'd be bored by a show or they'd be pissed off and instead of chanting "Fire Russo," they would just get behind an unlikely person because he had some endearing quality or looked funny or whatever and make him one of the stars of the show. But that's organic, but it's not necessarily serious or legitimate or something you're supposed to make long-term plans on. Now, other times, like Wardlow recently with AEW, a guy will get over in a positive way, in a good way. Yes, he's tearing the house down. They want to see him just powerbomb these motherfuckers. That's something that his merchandise, I would think, would have started selling maybe a little bit above over the edge of his skis, as they say, of his push at that time. And then they should have started pushing him. And they did, right back down the fucking totem pole.
But, you brought up Orange Cassidy before. To go to another example we've talked about on this show, Bray Wyatt. One of the big reasons we were told that WWE wanted Bray Wyatt back was that he was someone who moved a lot of merch. Does that do enough to justify the push?
Well, and that's what I was saying with Pockets. I can't see how it would, because it just makes a mockery of the entire goddamn program. with Bray Wyatt, because of the WWE machine, we're talking about the potential for millions of dollars of merchandise for one guy. I don't know if he was at that level, but I know that guys in the Austins and Rocks and Takers and the people of that nature have sold literally millions of dollars worth of their individual merchandise. And he was making, from what we heard, a couple $1 million anyway, was Bray Wyatt. So if that's the case, but that's the problem is now they've got so much money tied up in some of this other talent. You can't fucking kill off $2 million worth of Bobby Lashley for $2 million worth of Bray Wyatt. So do you just feed him underneath guys constantly? Because, I mean, what difference does it fucking make? I don't know.
And again, just having characters and them selling merch, the question has to become, how does that justify on-air time or anything? Danhausen sells a lot of merch. He's not really used in any memorable or important, I shouldn't say memorable. He's not used in an important role on that show. He's a comedy figure who's more of a character than a wrestler.
Well, but then the thing is, anybody he interacts with has to stand there dumbfounded for a little while and put his shit over, and then that leaves a mark. That leaves a mark.
But I guess my point is, things can move merch. Does that necessarily mean that should correlate to... I mean, right now, if we wanted to, we could probably sell several thousand Reggie the Cat t-shirts. Right now. Does that mean we should make Reggie the Cat a featured part of every single episode?
Probably not. Because then Ryan, his parent, would have wanted a cut too. And we'd get into all of that. But no, I say, and also, here's the thing, you know, some good, at the time, good hardcore porn on DVD was selling like hotcakes at one point before you get it all free on the internet. Does that mean that they needed to fucking add that to the shop WWE store? Or, you know, snuff films or whatever. You know, at some point.
I mean, those are extreme examples, but that is the point. I mean, just because something moves merch, does that necessarily mean you should have it on your show? If WWE can start selling boxes of awesome, should they do it even though it has nothing to do with their core business?
I would pay to see several members of the WWE roster deliver me their box.
Oh, here we go again. All right. Well, let's move on from this. I said we were going to go to Raw. One last question before we get there, because I just noticed this one and I'm curious. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Marcus Sewell in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. I was watching a video recently of Rikishi in a tag match against Haku and Russ McCullough. In the match, Haku went to super kick Rikishi, and instead of going left, he went right and was kicked in the face by Haku, and then Russ took a bump for no reason. Rikishi got a fan's chair and started hitting Russ in the back and the face until the match was stopped due to disqualification. Do you know if there was heat after the match between Rikishi and Russ prior or after the match? And was this before he was let go by OVW?
Well, I like the description that fucking Haku potatoed Rikishi and Russ McCullough took a bump. If Haku throws a potato, everybody falls down. That sounds to me like a match from the HWA, and we mentioned our friend Uncle Les Thatcher a little earlier in the program. That was one of the HWA shows in Cincinnati. We never had Rikishi in OVW, but he had him for a little while up there. Russ McCullough bounced back and forth a couple of times. I don't know why that Rikishi is the one that just wailed away on Russ with the chair, right?
According to his email, yes.
I don't know the specific reason for that, but I can probably imagine it was a good one, and he was only doing what everybody else that ever worked with Russ McCullough really wanted to do, was just wear the fucking guy out with a chair like you were beating a fucking carpet. Because he was just a big stiff.
All right, well, that answers that. And Jim, with that, let's get to your thoughts on Monday Night Raw. I was preparing for surgery. It seemed like it was a one-segment show to me. What did you think?
Oh, well, there were more than one segment, but not any that you really needed to pay a lot of attention to. However, we will briefly hit the high points on this thing. And it started out with Edge doing a promo, and here comes Judgment Day, and they made Finn Balor versus Edge for WrestleMania Hell in a Cell with Finn Balor. Finn takes me out of the whole daggum Judgment Day. He just doesn't fit. They all look fucking cool except him. He looks like an Irish Opie Taylor. But then the Judgment Day kicked the shit out of Edge, and here came to save them, I shit you not, Johnny Sameface and Loomis and Candy LaRue. And they got in a big fight, and they went to the break in the middle of the announcer still talking, like it was even a surprise to them. They were still talking. They just like, get the fuck out of this. So the first match was Sameface and Loomis against Dominic and Damian Priest. And they ended up, they beat Loomis instead of Sameface. They're protecting this fucking guy for something. And then I'll have you know, some girls beat up more girls backstage and got caught on camera. And about 35 minutes into the show, yes, I'm not kidding, MVP and Almost came to the ring to do a promo about WrestleMania. And then Brock Lesnar's music played. Did you see this?
I did see this, yes.
And this is what Brock chose over Bray Wyatt. He comes out looking like Klondike Brock, and he circled the ring a couple times, take up some time. And the USA Network drastically tried to bleep holy shit, but they got most of it. And they went face to chest. And then it was pantomime. Almost shows Brock his fist, and it's as big as Brock's head. And then Almost goes for a handshake, and Brock takes the handshake, but Almost won't let go. So Brock stomps on his fucking foot and goes to German him, but Almost stops him and gets the fucking face grab on Brock's face and tries to push him over the top rope. Was it the second or third try that he got him?
I think it was the second, although later on when they edited it, it was one try.
Well, I know Brock can go over the top rope, and so did he, or he wouldn't have volunteered. But the thing is, you've got to have some rhythm with the guy that it's like dancing. And he grabbed him, and you could tell that Brock was getting, and then they got off kilter with Almost shove, and then he had to kind of get under his ass and flip him over. So then Brock walks off. And that was it. So again, they had a bunch of referees come down and everything, but it wasn't like that they were pulling Brock back or holding him back or getting in between or being sacrificed by being thrown around at the monster wanting to get back in the ring at Almost. That's just you. It was just like, oh, okay, well, shit. I'll go on back to Saskatoon. Was this kind of oddly flat to end a segment with Brock Lesnar?
I guess so. I mean, they only have a limited amount of time to build up anything for this match. You know, they messed up the one spot they had, although, again, they edited it later in the same show. You wouldn't have even noticed it, because when they showed it again, it was seamless. I'm intrigued by Brock versus Almost what they're going to do. I mean, I can't really visualize the match. So I'm intrigued to see it. I don't know if they really need to do too much, quite frankly, to build up to the match.
Well, no, I don't think they need to do too much in the match. And I think if you see all the rest of Heyman's hair has fallen out of his head by the second week of April, this might be one of the reasons. If he's involved in any way with trying to help Brock out.
Let me go back a step. Did you like the Edge promo?
I didn't even pay attention because I'm Edge and Judgment Day more, and here comes Finn. I would, you know.
To me, there are times where Edge just doesn't feel in any way natural. It comes across completely like a pre-orchestrated script in his head, and it doesn't feel real. And to me, that's what this promo was. I hated the promo. I just thought Edge seemed like an actor here, not a professional wrestler.
Most of the time, I like Edge's speaking because he is so good at it and it sounds more natural, but maybe it's that he's kind of getting tired of this too, maybe. Because it's been going on for a while.
Well, he's been feuding with the Judgment Day a year, right?
Yeah, he started them.
A year ago.
He's been feuding with them longer than he ran them. He only got to run them like 2 months. But I know what you were talking about, the bright part of the program. And Cody Rhodes again proves that he's a genius. And he knows exactly who to pick to work with and exactly what he's fucking doing. The bell rang by the way, for the match number 2, 48 minutes into the program. But Cody versus LA Knight. And they actually had a wrestling match. And they started out the wrestling, and then tempers flared. And LA foiled Cody's dive, and that made Cody open up and go to the top. But LA leaped up, and that big vertical leap to the top, one motion, hit him with the suplex off the top. Great move. And they actually got to go 4 minutes until the break, deviating from the norm on Monday Night Raw. And did you notice, Brian, when they came back, the heat was still going? Because Cody knows they need to see the heels heat. Almost every other match on television now, from this company, a lot of them AEW, the heel will start the heat. They'll do the heat during the commercial break, and as soon as they come back from the other side, you see the babyface fighting back. Fighting back from what? According to the TV viewer. He was never in jeopardy to me. Came out on the losing end of one move before the commercial when I was distracted. Cody knows you need to see the babyface selling and see the heels heat so that the comeback will mean something. And he did that. And finally, then he made the big comeback and hit the big disaster kick for a 2 count. But then LA foiled the cutter into a back suplex 2 count. And Cody knows who can work and who can stay animated and who can be there for his shit and who can take the bumps. And then Cody foils LA's finisher and hits the Cody cutter and the crossroads. Boom, 1, 2, 3, big pop. LA Knight got more TV time out of this, doing this job, and looked better than he did the whole goddamn 4 weeks he was having to suffer working with Bray Wyatt. And they got 8 minutes on television for the match, and it ended at 8:59 p.m. so Cody could pick up his microphone and do an in-ring promo about WrestleMania at the top of the 9 o'clock hour. And before we talk about the promo, Brian, your thoughts on the match?
I thought it was all right. I was a little disappointed with the reaction LA Knight got on Raw. Maybe it's just because he's LA Knight. Yeah, that is his name, LA Knight.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. I was a little disappointed with the reaction he got when he came out, but he's not usually featured on Raw, and SmackDown he's been getting better and better reactions every week. I thought the match was good, but at a few points it seemed like they didn't mesh. I shouldn't say they didn't mesh well. There were a few spots I don't think they needed to do, and they were Cody spots, and they did them anyway. But beyond that, I thought it was a good match. The spot where LA Knight jumped to the top rope and it almost looked like a force suplex on the Cody Rhodes. That looked really good. And you almost got to hear him apologize on camera if you listened close enough. When he was on the mat, he's like, I'm so sorry, or whatever he said. But it was a good match. And I know LA Knight's not one of the younger wrestlers, but I'm happy they're using him. It's not even better. They're just using him and he's getting over. They still have him losing all the time to various people, but the fact that people are reacting to him is a good sign.
He's got some personality and some movement. And that's what they're lacking in a lot of other cases. But anyway, Cody's promo was perfect. Again, he's just had this match, so it didn't go 15 minutes, and that's for the better. He made his point. He aligned himself spiritually, intentionally. You know, we've got the same goals with Sammy and Owens. But then he said, Heyman talks about me making this personal. It's been personal since I was 21 years old. And the promo, it was a dusty promo. There was just the quotable line after the quotable line. I don't wear a suit because I think I am somebody. I wear a suit because I want to be somebody. You know, and April 2nd, he's hitting the date. He's got passion. He's got emotion. He's got fire. He's selling the match. It's the dusty promo, but with bigger words and updated for Cody's vocabulary. And I thought that was the strongest piece of business on the whole program.
It was an incredible promo. I thought it was an exceptional promo. And I think, you know, something that helps Cody when talking and needing to bring the passion is when he's actually exhausted and tired. There's a difference between Cody coming out there in the suit and doing what at times has come across, not so much here, but every now and then.
Theatrical,
rehearsed, planned out, thought out. When he's breathing heavily and you just saw him work and you can see the sweat coming down his forehead and he's saying a lot of these things, man, did that register. Yeah. I thought this was maybe the best promo he's done in WWE so far.
Yeah. And it's, again, I could hear Dusty in his slightly different lisp and his definitely different vocabulary, but hitting the points and the lines and the quotable moments. So he's coming through with flying colors with everything he needs to do to promote WrestleMania. And as we continue to see, you know, he's the guy that will eventually be the peacemaker and or the instigation to get, I think, Owens and Sammy back on the same page, same side, you know, cessation of tension, whatever the fuck.
But you know what? It hit me watching this show and it hit me thinking about it afterwards. I'm not going to say worried, but I hope, because they've done such a good job of building up Cody for this match. And people are taking to him, they're accepting him. They're there for the ride. They're there to see where this story's going to go. Is he going to get the belt they stole from his daddy at the Garden? If he does get that belt, what do you do then? I'm just a little worried. I shouldn't say worried, but I'm anxious to see how WWE will handle Cody not being the challenger, but Cody as the actual standard bearer, as the champion.
Yeah.
And who they're going to program him with and how they're going to treat a world champion, Cody Rhodes, if they do, in fact, go that direction.
I think he's probably going to want to do something with Austin Theory because I think he can see the potential there.
And if he gets a win over Cena at Mania, it sets him up perfectly.
There's whoever knows if Seth is a goddamn babyface or a heel or what, but they've done that to death. There's a shortage of top single names in the WWE, but they've milked this along. They can, and a rematch with Roman, etc. So they've got a ways to go. I'll tell you, Bronson Reed, and he was next, by the way, against Ezekiel. I don't know who the fuck Ezekiel is pissed off, but they beat him again in 2 minutes. But Bronson Reed, if he had a fucking manager like a Heyman, he's Crusher Blackwell when he was young. He can move for that size. He could be a wrecking ball. You could really put some credibility into him, but I don't think he can do his own talk. I've heard him talk. I don't think he should do his own talking as a 400-pound fucking monster at the top of the card.
Do they need a second credible manager beyond Heyman for someone like a Bronson Reed?
Well, sure. So does the world.
Yeah.
Find it. And no, I'm not if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve.
And that's not to take anything away from MVP, who I actually think does a great job week in and week out.
Well, but he's not new, and he's not. MVP is not the fucking, you know, evil slime ball that should have the wrecking ball beast monster like the Gary Hart with the Foreign Menace or Bobby Heenan with the missing link or whatever the fuck. Anyway, Kevin Owens still refuses help because when he asked for help, he didn't get any. And So now when people are offering him help, he doesn't want any. He's starting to get a little petulant. I'm thinking the fans are starting to go, all right, come on, man, get with the fucking program. Everybody wants to be on the same page now to fight the bloodline.
Yeah, they're running out of time. They got to do this already.
Yeah, well, and it's a shoot. They're being true to life because Steen is a goddamn obstinate, stubborn, fucking petulant dick. And he said he doesn't want Cody's help either tonight against Solo. So, by gum.
Hey, we didn't even talk about that last week on Raw, and I didn't even notice it, but I saw a picture after the fact. During one of the backstage promos, in the background, was Kevin Owens being talked to by Cody Rhodes.
Yes, they're dropping those little, what do the kids call them, Easter eggs?
Easter eggs, yes.
They're dropping those in there, yes, and they're seeing pitches made that make sense later on or whatever the fuck. But
one last thing about last week's Raw, because we didn't bring it up, and I want to because it was a member of the Cult of Cornette Facebook group. I don't have his name in front of me, who brought the sign. Did you see the sign with the corn and the net last week?
Yes, that was very, like, Pictionary. Very, very creative. Very, corn and net.
All right. Well, what else was netted on this show?
All righty. Austin Theory beat Daryl Dawkins. I know it's March Madness, but I don't want to watch wrestlers dressed like basketball players or basketball players dressed like wrestlers.
He's dropped a lot of weight. He actually looks like he's getting into better shape.
Who, Austin Theory?
No, Dawkins.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Well, maybe he and Flop Dollar are training together. So then Paul Lee did a promo on Owens and Cody and etc. And again, a master class, and called Cody a schmuck. Said next week Roman Reigns is going to be on Raw and Cody better acknowledge him. So we got that going for us. And then, honestly, again, Rey Mysterio was the 10 o'clock top of the hour entrance and the in-ring promo. He's going in the Hall of Fame, and yes, it's entirely deserved. Fantastic career as a superstar for 20 fucking whatever years, but he's still upset at Dominic. And Dominic comes out, and he's still upset at Ray, and Dominic's daring him to fight, and Ray won't fight his own son, and he walked out again, and this went a long time. Did I cover it?
It went for a while. Do you want to see Ray versus Dominic?
No.
Neither do I.
Because I think Dominic gets great heat as that putz, and he's a great package with Ripley, who makes it, and he could be a wonderful heat-getting heel, except when they're trying to do this unbelievable dramatic bullshit with him and his dad, and then I don't believe it, and it's not, and again, besides the fact that Ray's son is a foot taller than he is, at some point, wouldn't you just slap the fucking kid in the face and say, fuck you, I didn't raise you like this, you fucking little prick. Your mother's ashamed of you. Don't make me break my foot off in your ass. Get the fuck home. Or something like that.
They've done a lot to show the issues in the relationship, but there's nothing that actually makes me want to see the father beat the son. And maybe there are fans who want that, but I don't like it.
Anyway, and especially when it looks like that the son is a big bully for beating up his father. Seth Franklin Rollins beat Baron Von Corbin in 2 minutes, so they still hate him. And did you see Shush Boy in the back, or were you unconscious by that point?
No, I saw this.
Shush Boy was in the back, and he's got a missing poster for Otis. He can't find Otis, and there's a poster, missing Otis. And have you seen him? And suddenly, we see that he's in the back with the models and the model girl taking model pictures. And they did what I guess somebody has explained to him as comedy. And it was some embarrassingly phony fucking shit, and it looked like a cable access outlaw show. So with that, I said, fuck it. The main event is Kevin Owens against Solo Sikoa in a street fight with no disqualifications. So I'm skipping to the main event. After I saw Shush Boy and that embarrassment, there was a girls' match. The girls had a fight. Then we get to Owens and Solo, and they jump-started on the floor. They got in the ring, they did one spot, and they went back out to the floor for another 2 minutes. And then they got in the ring and Solo hit a Samoan drop on Owens, and they went back to the floor where Owens pulled out a table and Solo threw Owens over the announce desk and put the table back under the ring. And goddamn it, I loved that because I was about to fast forward again when the table came out, but they finally did it. He got heat on a break spot by putting the table back under the fucking ring.
When the fans started booing, when he started putting it back, I was like, man, how come no one has done this before? It's perfect.
And that's what I wish they'd do every goddamn time. So anyway, they go to the break, they come back, and at the point that they came back, Solo, who just started getting some heat on Owens, is laying on the floor while Owens is in the ring, setting up, one at a time, 6 chairs all in line in the ring, 3 and 3, seats facing each other so that they can take a bump off the top through that platform of chairs. And neither one of them is on the top rope while he's doing it. So at that point, and remember what I said earlier, indie-minded subset of wrestlers. Steen was one of the original poster boys. You can't get it out of him. And he's going to do shit like this. So when I saw that, I said, fuck it, I'm going to go to the finish just to see who wins. They ended up in the crowd. They had to fight through the entrance to Gorilla. Owens walks right into a double super kick by the Usos in the Gorilla position. And then they drag him back to the ring and roll him in, hit him with another double super kick. Solo hits the spike, and they beat him 1, 2, 3.
That surprised me.
It surprised me, too, not that they would beat Owens, but that they would do a finish like this that is so... You know, when everybody says cheap heat, that's when you cuss somebody's mother or say, oh, the insert name of town sucks. That's cheap heat. Disgusting heat is when you beat a babyface that the people like in such a preposterous and obviously unfair fashion that the heat doesn't go on the heels, it goes on the promotion for allowing it, or the referee, or whatever the case. And this is kind of modern day disgusting heat. They give them this street fight match, no DQ, lazy booking. And then the finish, in that case, why didn't the Usos just come out there with one with a ball bat and the other one with a goddamn, I don't know, a piece of fucking concrete block, and they just attack Owens at the bell and just bash his head, put his head on the concrete block and bash it with the baseball bat? Because that would have been legal. So when they do shit like this where they use the no DQ crutch to, that's why 2 guys not related in front of the referee, in front of God and everybody, beat him, knock him out, drag him to the ring, knock him out again, stand there while the other heel hits his finish, and then the referee counts. That's disgusting heat, and it's uncreative. But that's what happened.
That was WWE Raw. That was what happened. The road to WrestleMania continues. We'll talk about SmackDown and as well as Dynamite and other things on the experience this week. But earlier in the show, Jim, Austin Theory was backstage, had a confrontation with the Street Profits. Not a bad promo. I thought the Street Profits actually, in terms of facial expressions, did a good job there. But you may have noticed Austin Theory had a nice pair of sunglasses on. What happens if the Street Profits say enough of this guy and they break his sunglasses?
Oh, well, if they would have done that, it would have killed the whole thing. Because after all, Austin Theory, a young whippersnapper, a good-looking guy with a body of a Greek god, and he's very ostentatious, and he has to cut a good fashionable profile. He's got to have the shades on, the sunglasses. Imagine Gino Hernandez without his sunglasses. Imagine Ric Flair in the day with the 3-piece suit and the title belt, no sunglasses. Imagine what would happen If that day Austin Theory had only had one pair of sunglasses, what would have happened? His career would have been over. It would have been ruined, is what it would have been. But thankfully, Austin Theory knows what the rest of us know, Brian, and what we are excited now to tell our audience about on the brand new debut of another fine sponsor. I'm talking about Shady Rays. Now, you may have heard of Shady Ray before. Actually, that was an imitation Shady Ray. He was an imposter Shady Ray. He was the guy that would stand under the oak tree in the shade there.
What are you talking about?
And he would give people financial tips. He was a shady guy that lived in the shade, and he told people how to invest their money. We don't want to talk about him. We want to talk about Shady Ray, the Ray that's making the high-quality sunglasses. That's what we're talking about.
That's right.
Because Shady Ray, what is worse than buying a pair of expensive sunglasses and either losing them right after you get them, you set them down somewhere, possibly the frozen pie section at Kroger, and you walk off and leave them, or you sit on them. They fall down on the car seat, you sit on them, you break them, you're shot right there. You're just bumfuzzled. You're just screwed right there. You are dicked by the dangle dong of destiny because you're sunglassless. But now, with Shady Rays, not only are they durable, they're not going to fucking break easy. It's going to take some effort. You're not just going to accidentally crack these things in a million pieces. You're going to have to try hard. As a matter of fact, I encourage you, take a goddamn ball-peen hammer.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that?
No, don't encourage people to do that.
Well, you don't know what I was going to encourage them to do with that hammer, but nevertheless, they're not easy to break, folks, and they all have polarized lenses for crystal clear vision and strong sun protection. They're built to tackle all of life's outdoor adventures. The styles are timeless. You'll lose track of time when you're wearing these glasses, and they're so dark you won't be able to see your watch. That's why they're timeless. But every pair of Shady Rays is backed by their industry-leading lost and broken replacement program. And if you break or lose your pair, the second you take them out of the box, they will send you a replacement pair for free. And they're not happy unless you're happy. They give you 30 days to try them. If you don't like them, if for some reason they cause you to go blind suddenly in the middle of the night like that one weird test case.
There's no test case. You will not go blind in the middle of the night.
Well, he was an excessive masturbator, so that could have contributed. But if you don't like them, you can exchange them or return them for free. That's what you can do. So right now, you've got Shady Rays, their high-quality sunglasses that are just as good or even better than expensive ones at a fraction of the price. They're durable, hard to break, stylish, timeless, backed by an industry-leading replacement program where they'll freely and of their own free will and for free, that means gratis, you pay nothing, replace them if you're clumsy or negligent. And guess what? What is better than getting one pair of Shady Rays and not worrying if you break or lose them? Getting two pairs of Shady Rays. Because right now, you can go to Shady Rays, that's ShadyRays.com, ShadyRays.com/JCE. Use the code JCE for a limited time now, so don't waste any time. Don't be dragging your feet. When you buy one pair of Shady Rays, you're going to get a second pair for free. ShadyRays.com/JCE, code JCE. Second pair of Shady Rays free. And you know, that's going to come in handy because they are addressing an issue that needs to be brought to light. We've talked about raising money for breast cancer awareness and etc. Well, you know, Brian, you've heard of conjoined twins. Well, I'll have you know that one of the Featherbottom's cousins, Melancholia Featherbottom, she was actually, the poor thing, born with a conjoined face. And everything's normal as it's supposed to be, but once you get up under the chin, there's a dent in the middle and she's got a face on each side. And son of a bitch, I'll tell you what, she can walk straight across the street and look both ways at the same time. It's amazing. But she has a hard time with sunglasses because she got to buy 2 pairs. See, because she's actually got 4 eyes, but there's only 3 ears. It's a confusing arrangement to demonstrate to you verbally. But goddamn, she needs the 2 sunglasses. So right now, she's making out when she can get 2 pair of Shady Rays for the price of 1, and that way she can put them both on her. And, she gets red eyes because Melancholia cries a lot because of her condition. And goddamn, they've had to save her from drowning 3 times. You ought to see 4 eyes crying in the rain. ShadyRays.com/JCE. Use the code JCE. 2 pairs, 1 for you, 2 for Melancholia.
That's right, Shady Rays. Check them out today. Let us know how you like them. We think you'll really like them. But Jim, let's get a few more questions here on the show. A popular topic over the last few days, I don't know if you followed this, but Nikki and Brie Bella, or the former Nikki and Brie Bella, have parted ways with WWE. They are now back to their Christian names, the Garcia twins. They have a lot of things happening out there in media. They will no longer be allowed to use the name Bellas. Apparently, they chose that name because their grandfather used to call them that, but because WWE owns it,
oh, my little Bellas,
they can no longer use it. Any thoughts on the Bellas not being associated with WWE anymore, and specifically not being allowed to use their name anymore?
The Bellas not being the Bellas. They're not ringing the Bellas anymore. I saw this and they did the statement, well, we're going on to the next chapter in our lives and we've loved the Bellas, but the character, blah, blah, blah. How many names do they have? Now, they had Bella, they had Garcia, but each one of them's married to Bryan Danielson, so her legal name would be Danielson. The other one married some Russian guy, and I'm not even going to attempt to try to pronounce that name. Maybe that's why they said, fuck it, we'll go with Garcia. It's only 6 letters. Again, I'm sorry if this is not a tragedy to wrestling in my eyes. The Bellas? I mean, we're not talking about Moolah and Mae Young here as it relates to their impact on professional wrestling or tenure in it.
Did you see Britt Baker's tweet?
No. Is she going to start calling herself Britt Bella now?
No, but she actually legally could. But Britt Baker put out a tweet, which was an old picture, I guess, of her as a fan with the Bella twins, and it said, "For real, there's not a single female wrestler today that wasn't somehow inspired and influenced by Nikki and Brie. Thank you."
Lord. To do what?
That's where we're at today in wrestling.
Have subpar wrestling matches because you're pretty twins? I mean, have I missed? I know I didn't watch a lot. I've just said earlier in the show I didn't watch a lot of the wrestling during their era, but have I missed something that they were out there just tearing the place up and having these fantastic wrestling matches, or was that something that was overlooked?
No, but I guess if you are a female wrestling fan who was watching during that period of time and you wanted to potentially be a wrestler, I could understand how maybe because they were there and on TV, they could have inspired you just because they were doing it. But as anyone, I don't know. I mean,
it's reality TV, and let's talk about we're getting pregnant with our babies. I mean, this is where we're at. The wrestling business now, again, reality TV about their happy home lives and how they're juggling their careers and their babies. I just want to see some motherfuckers bash each other over the head with a good fight. Fuck, we got to put up with this shit now. So no, I don't give 2 flying French fried titty fucks, whether the Bellas or the Garcias or anybody else related to them. Speaking of which, related to them, why don't they say Brie and Nikki Laurinaitis? He's in the family. That's a name known in wrestling.
It's hard to spell.
I don't care.
It's hard to spell.
It's even harder to stomach.
Well played.
But I don't care whether the Bellas are in the wrestling business or not.
Do you think fans do, in the sense that, like, they've already denied that they're going to AEW, and a lot of fans thought because Bryan Danielson was there, because they were just pictured backstage with Renee Moxley Good and a few other people, that maybe they were going there. They've denied it. But do you think for a wrestling company there is any tangible value in having them on the roster?
Well, again, everybody knows who they are. If they know who modern wrestling personalities are at all, they've heard their names. They've been on the reality TV. Maybe they'll get some, I would say maybe they'll get some females to watch the show. Actually, it'd probably still be guys, grown adult men with their picture of their favorite girl wrestler as their profile picture or whatever. Again, bleh, I don't care.
All right, well, here's something else.
Yeah.
Well, here's something else that maybe you will or won't care about. I have an article that several listeners have sent in from slashfilm.com.
Uh-oh.
The headline, "The Pandemonium movie is not happening. Writers say Vince McMahon killed it." This is an exclusive. Of course, Pandemonium was, I believe, the film that they were going to do about Vince McMahon. We were doing Pandemonium Theater on 605, Swami's barking, where we would read the script because it was one of the worst scripts of all time in terms of wrestling accuracy. Completely inaccurate in every possible way.
Well, you can't even call it inaccurate when it's not even close enough to the actual happenings to be called inaccurate. They just made shit up from fucking scratch.
Yeah, I believe in the script, they even tried to say that he found Jimmy Snuka. He was like doing pornos. I mean, it's just a horrible script.
Well, remember, wasn't that the one where somehow Linda was joking with Vince about, hey, give me some butt sex or whatever?
No, she was, I think, joking with Gorilla Monsoon that that's why they should sign Hulk Hogan, is because he's the kind of guy that makes women want butt sex. So that was this script, but let me go to this article here. Thanks to readily available information at our fingertips, we don't really have folk heroes anymore, but kayfabe is still alive thanks to the world of pro wrestling. I mean, sports entertainment. By the way, this is by B.J. Colangelo. Of those figures, there is no one quite as polarizing as Vincent Kennedy McMahon. For nearly half a century, Vince McMahon has been the most powerful presence in the world of professional wrestling. Let me find where it actually gets to some fucking shit here. And heaven forbid anyone tells the story about Vince McMahon's countless shortcomings. For many years, John Requa and Glenn Ficarra have been attached to direct a Vince McMahon biopic called Pandemonium. The project first picked up steam in 2017 with rumors that Bradley Cooper had been tapped to play the gruff-voiced businessman, but it's all been quiet on the cinematic squared circle for quite some time. In the years since, McMahon's public image has been irreparably tarnished, and he's currently treating the behind-the-scenes leadership struggles at WWE like an episode of Succession with suplexes. With a reputation in desperate need of redemption, we can officially say that Pandemonium is no more. Film's Vanessa Armstrong recently spoke with Requa and Ficarra about their new streaming series.
Requa and Ficarra. It sounds like noises you make right before you're going to vomit.
And asked about other projects they were attached to, including Pandemonium. Unfortunately, as Glenn Ficarra tells us, quote, Pandemonium is dead, sadly. According to John Requa, Vince killed it. We never in our career had the studio. We had the actor. Everyone was just like, let's make this movie. And Vince said, we're not making it, explains Requa. Pandemonium was only going to be made with the involvement and approval of WWE Studios, so even before McMahon counted out the project, we likely never would have gotten a truly authentic look at just how insidious McMahon has been for over 40 years. Compare the WWE-approved Ric Flair docuseries to the Vice Dark Side of the Ring episode, and you'll see what I mean. It's a shame the film isn't going to happen, but the duo knows they're not alone. Here's a quote from Requa. So yeah, we're on the very long list of people who got fucked over by Vince. Any thoughts on Vince McMahon killing the Vince McMahon movie?
Yes, it was euthanasia. It was a mercy killing. These fucking clowns. I'm all for a legitimate documentary or movie or whatever the fuck being made of Vince, but we saw the script, or at least the part that they released. And if those were the parts that they let out, I can't imagine what they kept back. It was the worst script in the history of Hollywood. It was completely made up bullshit that didn't even sound good or like the people involved. So they're trying to now say, and I firmly believe that Vince got it killed, because I'm sure he said, if you make this movie and say these things about me and my family, I will sue you. Because it was ridiculous. So, yeah, so they're trying to say...
it. Didn't WWE buy the rights to the film?
Probably to just not have it made. The point is, this fucking script was floating around, and we said at the time that there's no goddamn way that Vince will... that they bought it so Vince could fucking change it, if anything. There's no way it's going to be made. And now they're acting like that this evil corporate executive killed their budding Academy Award winner when it was fucking dreck to begin with. They weren't going to make a good movie with a good script. They were going to make a stupid movie with a shitty script that was all made up. So why wouldn't he want to kill it? And he saved us the viewing public the trouble of making it a goddamn bomb by preventing it from being made. Can you imagine if they did anything related to the script segments that we read, how bad it would be and how the wrestling fans would laugh at it?
That was what I was hoping for, yeah. Certainly was what I was hoping for, but I guess that's dead. And so now the Vince McMahon biopic, Pandemonium, is dead. The documentary project that Netflix was doing, is that the same one that Bill Simmons was involved with? I think so.
I think so. That's what I'd like to see, because that doesn't seem like they'd be jacking around trying to...
Yeah, if Bill Simmons is involved, they'll play friendly with WWE. That's the problem.
Well, but I mean, they're not going to, goddamn, just make up this ridiculously badly written shit about his life. They might just not tell the whole truth, but they're not going to, do a fucking complete fictitious rewrite.
Well, Jim, another question sent here to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com is from Preston Holton. Where do you think Paul Heyman ranks amongst the greatest managers of all time? Do you think he has or will ever pass Bobby Heenan as the greatest of all time?
No. I mean, I'm not knocking Paul now. Nobody's going to pass Bobby because nobody's going to get the chance again. Bobby was the best for the longest. And, you can argue that other people... Jimmy Hart was more important from 1980 through 1984 in Memphis than any other manager ever was to a specific location, I think. But even that could be argued with some managers in their territorial heydays. Bobby was at the top and in the mix and was good for a long period of time, over 20 years. There's never going to be a manager that over or used that well again, and certainly nobody's going to do it for over 20 years. So he's got that. Bobby was the best worker in the ring of any manager that I can think of, even the guys that were previously wrestlers, because by the time they were managers, they were old enough at, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people say, oh, Cornette, your promos were great. Well, Bob even said, oh, I could never talk like you. Well, I could never work like you, Bobby. So were my promos for a shorter period of time more consistently good, but then I did it for half the time at the top level that Bobby did. So, I don't think anybody, and there, some people are going to like Gary Hart, or they're going to like J.J. Dillon, or they're going to like any one of any other numerous managers, but nobody was as good, as figured in, and as good at everything for as long as Bobby Heenan was. And now, because of the way the business has changed, we'll never, ever get the chance to be again. So, no, he's the best. That's just it.
Couple questions coming out of that. Where do you see Heyman ranking? I mean, I don't want you to give me a 1 to 5, but in terms of importance and...
But no, Paul Lee was very good, and Paul Lee right now has the field all to himself because there are no other legitimate managers. There are people that are called managers, and they're playing manager, but there's no other legitimate ones, and he's light years ahead of everybody else verbally, either managers, wrestlers, or almost anybody else. Paul never got to draw money in the territory days as a manager because he didn't get started until that was gone. So the question is, in a territory situation, night after night, could he have gotten guys over and drawn money and done the stipulation matches and all the other stuff? We don't know. But on television, in the modern era, he's been great at captivating people's attention on TV and getting ratings and or talking his guys over. And I mean, from the difference in Paul from ECW to now is incredible. He wasn't nearly the orator back then that he is now. He's gotten older and wiser and better. Having said that, he purposely took himself out of the managing picture to do ECW for quite a while. So, and the thing is with Paul, the only thing that he never learned to do or was able to do was master the physical part of it. He could never work. He couldn't even work like I could work, much less like, Bobby. And so the physical part, whether it be bump taking or on offense or whatever, that was his shortcoming. But the verbal made up for it when he put himself in the game as a manager and when he hadn't buried himself, getting fired back and forth from WCW or WWE because he's the same as me, but completely different. He just doesn't like to put up with horse shit. So, but he's definitely one of the greats.
Is this the best work of his career?
As a manager, yes.
As an on-air talent?
Well, as an on-air talent, yes. But, he did commentary, but this is much better than the commentary that he did years ago. So this is, I think, the best stuff that he's been doing. And it's now, because the field is also dropped back so far and he's run away with it, that it stands out even more now. When 15, 20 years ago, when he was on TV with a bunch of guys that could talk, it wasn't as clearly obvious as it is now.
You brought up an interesting point earlier about Jimmy Hart from 1980 to 84 or 85, depending on how you look at it. He was there until early 85. Maybe the most important manager to a specific territory in history. But then you said, even that's debatable. How debatable is it? Because there are very few managers that were actually, I hate to use the word main eventers, but Jimmy Hart was, correct me if I'm wrong, you were there. He was the main eventer against Lawler for several years, even if he wasn't wrestling.
Yes, and the whole thing was the rivalry between Hart and Lawler got a hold of him and beat the shit out of him on a regular basis, but it still didn't take his heat because he'd just bring some other heel in and start the whole thing over again. But I'm talking about, back in the 60s and 70s, Saul Weingeroff had some fucking much heat with the Von Brauners for short periods of time that you could say, well, goddamn, Gentleman Saul, he's drawing the houses because he's got all the heat. It didn't go as long as Jimmy Hart's did in that angle and program, or you could say that the Gary Hart Army and Dusty in Florida in 74, 75, that was very important. But Jimmy was the whole package. And there could have been some other smaller territories that we've forgotten about with the particular run of a manager. But for modern times, that there's still video and for longevity, big business overall, Jimmy was crucial to Memphis for those years. But Bobby Heenan, Bruiser never recovered really from losing Bobby. He lost a lot of other talent at the same time in 74 when they settled the war. But all the Indiana fans said that it was like before Heenan and after Heenan. In terms of before Bobby left and after he left, that was their dividing line of when they stopped really grooving on Bruiser's wrestling. And he was important for Vern and the AWA.
But like someone, for instance, like a Ken Ramey, a big part of the show, and obviously the interns wouldn't have meant anything. I shouldn't say anything, but they wouldn't have been what they were without Dr. Ken Ramey.
Right.
But how important was he to the actual territory?
Well, a guy like Ramey, not necessarily, only during the period of time where they were on top. Because then you could, maybe bring Ramey into the 6-man or whatever. But they went from he didn't homestead. He and the interns or whoever he managed, they went from territory to territory and didn't stay in one place for years at a time. A lot of the Tennessee managers would settle in and stay, and they'd rotate heels, in and out for them, whether it was J.C. Dykes or Jimmy Kent or Sam Bass. So in some of those territories, your manager stayed longer and he got to mean more. But still, Jimmy was an extreme case where it was all built around him for all of that time.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from David Smith in Frankfort, Kentucky.
If that is indeed his real name.
What is your opinion through a wrestling fan's eyes? What is your opinion through a wrestling fan? I'm going to read this as is, although, Swami, shut up. I'm going to read this as is. What is your opinion through a wrestling fan's eyes? Does Greg Valentine fall in regards to all-time greats?
Now, would that be where does he come in that field, or does he fall off the list? Or I'm not sure about the wording, but Greg, especially for his prime era in the from early mid-70s to late 80s, was one of the most solid workers in the business. He wasn't an over-the-top promo personality, but he got it from his father, Johnny, that he was straight ahead and serious. There was a great clip that went around on Twitter here a few days ago while you were hooked up to a machine from Florida in 76 of him dropping the elbow on the board and breaking the board with the elbow, sort of like a karate demonstration, but with his elbow drop to show how much force it had. And he was just a straight ahead guy like that, but he could sell, he could work. I can't say that honestly, Greg Valentine needs to go on the list, in between Londos and Thez and Hogan and Savage and Piper and Rock and Austin, but he drew quite a bit of money and was used quite well for a long period of time and was a great worker. I think he's one of the guys that he did so many indies over the last, I don't know if he's still doing them now, but for 20 years there, you'd see Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake on a lot of indies. And he'd slowed down and he got older and, didn't have the same oomph of his youth, nor do we all, but maybe that's what some people have seen, and it probably hadn't done him any favors in the way he's remembered.
Well, perhaps he needs a better lawyer.
Somebody to represent him.
That's right.
Especially if he's being accused of doing things in places where he wasn't even there. Have you heard about this now? Have you read about this, Brian? Someone has been accused of doing something and being somewhere that they didn't do and weren't at. And guess who has come to the rescue of this incredible young student athlete from the University of Alabama? You know who it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Folks, we've told you about how Stephen P. New is bringing down evildoers, whether they on a big scale or a small scale. Everything from protecting this young woman who was an innocent victim of a prevert over there in the West Virginia legislature to filing class action suits against energy companies and major pharmaceutical companies for damaging people. And now he's going back to help out the little guy again. Have you heard about Kai Spears? Brian, he's a student athlete at the University of Alabama, and his parents are now being represented by the law offices of Stephen P. New Taylor and Associates. Everybody's jumping in on this one. Apparently, there was an article in the New York Times from just a few days, yesterday, that has identified Kai Spears as a person at the scene of a shooting. But according to a statement that Stephen P. New has released, I will read some of this, all is not as it appears. The article in the New York Times dated March 15, 2023, identifying Kai as a fourth person at the scene of a shooting is demonstrably false, as we can demonstrate Kai was not in the car nor near that vicinity at the time in question. He wasn't even there. It was Owen. And Stephen's statement goes on to say this irresponsible journalism has harmed Kai and his family, as well as the University of Alabama and Marshall University. And I have reached out to general counsel for the New York Times with no response. They're hiding from Stephen P. New. And again, a statement from the Spears family, Christian Spears, the father, says, I'm furious at the completely erroneous article placing my son in the car at the scene. It is absolutely false. Kai was not there. And I am grateful to the people who are supporting our family. And one of those, the main one, is our legal watchdog himself, Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, who is now going to take down, apparently, the New York Times and whoever demonstrably falsely presented this demonstrably false information. How dare people do such a thing with Stephen P. New on the case, Brian?
He'll make them pay. Don't worry.
Well, I'm not worried. I'm comfortable about the whole thing. I'm confident.
I didn't think you were worried necessarily.
I'm confident. Anytime Stephen takes hold of something, it comes out right. So, folks, if you'd like Stephen to take a hold of something for you and make it come out right, Stephen P. New, Nude Law Office, Nude Law Office,
yes.
newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. And possibly their Friday is casual day, Monday is nude day over at the Nude Law Office.
Well, that's right. Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Give him a call today.
But he's only going to be naked if you ask him to be. If you ask him to, he'll take his clothes off for the meeting, but otherwise he keeps them on.
He is very professional. I assure you, he will be fully clothed, whether you request his nudity or not. He will defend you.
He always tries to please his clients.
He wins for his clients. He fights for his clients. He's a champion of the working man. And that's Stephen P. New. That's right.
Well, and he'll get naked if you want him to.
He will not get naked. Stop.
He's got nothing to hide. He conceals nothing from his clients. He's all the way out in the open.
He has nothing to hide, but New is not nude, and New is not lewd, and he will not be nude or lewd for you, but he will be winning for you and fighting for you, Stephen P. New.
Yes. And he has nothing in his pockets. And he'll show you, because he won't have any pockets on.
Well, let's move on from here, because it doesn't seem like we can get out of this. A little bit more about Stephen at the end of the show. I got another email about this. Here's another email from Rodney Davenport. In the Russ McCullough and Rikishi incident, why was McCullough the one that Rikishi and the other Samoan got mad at? My untrained eye sees Haku as the botcher. Sorry if you've explained this before. Is this going around or something?
Apparently, well, okay, if you're going to get mad at Haku, what are you going to do? You going to fight him or anybody else on the fucking planet?
What are you going to do? You're going to fight him or just turn around and beat up Russ McCullough?
Yeah, just say, fuck you. I just got my fucking face smashed in, so I'm just going to beat up this fucking putz over here.
All right, Jim, let's get another question here. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Phil in Whitehall, Pennsylvania.
Oh, my old friend Phil McCracken.
Not too far from a famous, very infamous motor lodge. That's what it says here. With all the recent talk about the cameras in AEW shooting ridiculously blatant blade jobs, it made me wonder if Jim knew at what point were the cameramen smartened up about the business. Say, for example, one wrestler has another wrestler in a headlock and is trying to call the next spots. Would the cameraman have known that maybe you shouldn't be getting a really tight close shot right now when you could hear both of them or read their lips? Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, there's not one blanket answer again. I'll try to succinctly cover a couple of possibilities. In the old days with studio TV and the wrestling program being done at different television studios by staff cameramen and staff directors and audio guys. You know, for one thing, thankfully, it wasn't high def television. And if it was only like a 2-camera, sometimes 3-camera setup, there weren't a ton of close ups. Studio wrestling, and you can even see the tapes from the 80s where one was kind of a long shot and one was kind of halfway long. Every once in a while, they'd get a handheld in there, depending on the operation. But these people worked for the television stations, and there was varying degrees of smartness in them. Most of them were not officially smartened up, but if they did the wrestling show every Saturday morning and they'd talk amongst themselves and they'd talk to the director, after a while, they probably picked up on what not to shoot, or that might not be good. And they worked for the TV station. They wanted to do a good job, right? So there was that element of it. And a lot of times the promotion would have one person. Randy Hales used to do this in Memphis at Channel 5. But the promotion would have somebody that was smart, that was either the booker or one of the assistant bookers or somebody from the office that would be in the control room and kind of give the director advice, which they would be open to. Hey, yeah, it's your program. What do you want me to shoot? And they'd say, oh, no, don't shoot that or shoot this or whatever, without actually smartening them up all the way. Then, in more modern times, when they started doing more stuff on the road, they started taking more, the big companies, they would take more of the cameramen on a regular basis. So they would kind of know what was going on, and then everything got opened up after that. So now, yes, they're all in a production meeting. They're all smartened up. They're all told either what's going to happen ahead of time or what is expected to happen ahead of time. And there's no secrets kept from them, but that's been a more recent development. But I think it's always a combination. It's how smart is the guy? What has he figured out on his own? And if he's a professional cameraman, he can kind of tell. But then again, the director is the one who tells the cameraman what to shoot in terms of, camera 3, get close on the hold, or camera 3, back up, zoom out, too close. The director, if he's telling, and the director is telling the technical director what shots to take. So if the director is looking at the monitor and the shot from camera 3 has a close-up of the guy gigging himself, if the director knows what he's doing, he's taking the fucking wide shot from camera 1, where you can't tell what's going on. So it's not as easy as just the cameraman being smart or the director being smart. There's a lot of moving parts, and the more cameras you use, the more cameramen you've got going on, then the busier the director is, and the more chance there is for something to go wrong, which is why I've never seen, I'll just say this and then I'll finish it. I've never seen what I've seen in AEW over the last 3 months on television in the way of catching people using blades out in the open, handing blades off, seeing blades in their hand. Cumulatively, in 40-something years of watching wrestling, I've never seen it as obvious as I've seen it the last 3 months on AEW television. It's not just the crew, it's the talent, it's everybody.
When it comes to calling spots, one of the things that probably hurts wrestling nowadays is that you don't have such constant loud audiences. So
True.
That more is noticeable. How do you combat that? I mean, obviously you have to call spots to do a match. If it is dead silent, if it's one of the women's matches in AEW and the crowd is sitting there watching but not making any noise, you got to call your spots. What do you do?
I mean, the really top talents it's almost like a form of ventriloquism. I swear to God, I've been in the ring with Lawler a couple of times where I heard his voice in my head, but I was looking at his face and I didn't see his lips moving, but he was talking to me. I could hear it, but I couldn't tell it was coming from him, except it was his voice. Some guys throw their voice like that. Can't see their lips moving, and they're not talking loudly enough sometimes it's just a stray comment, fall straight back, and they'll take care of the rest. Okay. There's ways you can grab a hold and cover up a little bit and talk in a quiet position if you know how to do it, but not to have a long, granular, detailed conversation, but just certain little things. The old Harley race, or the guys that used to make the Cactus did that a little bit. All that shit. They were covering up and drop down and a leapfrog. So you could hear it, you still couldn't hear it. And then, sometimes it's just guys feeling things, and they've talked about a spot maybe beforehand, and let's go into it, and they know what they're doing. It depends on the experience level, and it depends on the talent in question. What's really made it tough is, and this started with World Class. When we first got there, the production where they had the floor camera handheld guys in the ring or near the ring, they had microphones on the ring posts. So they would say, watch your spot, call it. Because the ring is mic'd like crazy. There's microphones up everybody's ass. Well, with the Midnight and the Fantastics, it just a word or a phrase or an Iggy on the wrist, and they were off and doing whatever anyway. But if it was somebody you'd never worked with before, you had to keep it kind of simple, or, stay away from the fucking ring posts where the microphones were. The invasive nature of today's television, the high def, the coverage with the big companies, WWE and AEW, you can see more lips moving than ever before, and you can detect some of this shit. But the really good guys at doing it, you can't tell when they got their color. You can't tell how they called their spot. It's just tougher now than it used to be. And like you said, in the territory days, there was, maybe in the first or second preliminary at a house show, there'd be moments where things quieted down. But for the most part, there was such steady noise. And again, with when the Rock and Roll Express came in the ring, I could stand there and scream at the top of my lungs, and the people standing next to me, my own tag team, couldn't really hardly hear me. So you could say anything in that environment, but they don't act like that about wrestling anymore because they're too smart.
Jim, a few more questions, then we'll get out of here. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Pete in Providence, Rhode Island. I recently heard comments by The Undertaker saying that he wished today's wrestlers would live their gimmick a little bit more. I would extend that, though, to the wrestling companies as well. Growing up, I watched wrestlers literally choke people out when it was even hinted that wrestling was fake. To nowadays, when they're holding a press conference immediately after an event, telling us how it was all just a show. What happened to kayfabe? I was hoping you could speak a little bit about this point, but let's go back to the first one, because actually I didn't realize it was going to go so off here.
Yeah.
The Undertaker, his comments about guys not living their gimmick, guys not protecting their gimmick, and who better to speak about that than The Undertaker?
Well, yes, and even when people weren't so smart to every inside working of the business, they could still tell bullshit from not bullshit. And if the more legitimate guys, the guys who they could make the comment, well, say what you want, but that guy's mad. Or the ones that would say, like Terry Funk and Johnny Valentine, I can't make them believe wrestling is real, but I can make them believe I'm real. The ones that went the extra mile, that seemed the more legitimate, that were the more believable in terms of, I think that guy's really like that. Those were the ones that drew the money, because it was about making people believe as much as possible that the person that you are selling to them as whatever, a Canadian lumberjack or a goddamn karate expert or whatever the fuck, that's who they are. And the best talent went the extra mile to whether it was their gimmick or whether it was their angle. If Junkyard Dog in Louisiana, when the Freebirds blinded him, if instead of going home and sitting in his apartment with the drapes drawn for 2 months so that nobody would know that he wasn't really blind, if he'd been going out every night to the fucking club or going to the goddamn Golden Corral and saying, boy, what a great performance we put in on TV with them blinding me. It's going to be a great match. They wouldn't have drawn 30,000 people in a Superdome. The fans wouldn't have been sending him $500 a week in ones and fives and change because they felt sorry for him because he was disabled. That's what you had to, if instead of meeting at Jerry Calhoun's house the night before the fucking match to go over the goddamn thing in his living room so nobody would know about it, if Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman had gone out in the Coliseum and got in the ring about 5 o'clock day of the show and let all the fucking janitors see them working out the pile driver, would we still be talking about that 40 years later? No. It's shoddy workmanship, lack of professionalism, lack of dedication, and the aspiration to, instead of wanting to be a top main event wrestling star, want to be a goddamn entertainer, an actor, a reality TV star, and play a multitude of parts that makes all these fucking jack-offs and dipshits come out and even if they do a performance that you could actually buy into, they will immediately do a press conference or send out a picture on Twitter with their arm around the person they just tried to anally rape with a chainsaw. Said, oh, we made such great art together. Fuck you. That's why that Undertaker said that, because the guys because they have been told that they're entertainers and actors and show business people and television performers. That's how they act like. And that's why nothing registers anymore, because nobody believes the shit. Every once in a while, you get somebody like Brock or this bloodline thing that, even though it's preposterous, the performances have been good, or whatever the fuck, and then that person gets over and makes a lot of money. Because in the middle of a fucking bowl of fruits and nuts, they're the goddamn real deal.
People knew The Undertaker wasn't really a dead man. They knew he wasn't really an Undertaker, but he still did that. So if a younger...
And a 7 foot tall, 300 something pound fucking guy that looks like that doing that shit is kind of goddamn intimidating.
I was going to say to a wrestler today, if their argument is, well, everyone knows it's fake, why should I protect my gimmick on social media or anything? Everyone knew The Undertaker wasn't really dead, and he did it, and it benefited his career. Wouldn't you say? The mystique around The Undertaker, never doing interviews, never doing anything, actually helped him. When he started talking a few years ago, now you realize, why, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, and then and he only started doing that when he realized that the jig, as they say, was up and his time was done and he was retiring.
Jim, another question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Joe Halstead in Shepherd, Michigan. If WWE takes bets on a main event match and one of the wrestlers, having had no advance input on the outcome, holds up WWE over it, would WWE cave? Or would Triple H cut a promo telling fans they won't see wrestler A tonight because he's a greedy piece of shit? Hypothetically, could Reigns successfully demand a contract extension worth more money and inclusive of guarantees and less ring time? Or would WWE declare the title vacant, have a match for it, and later sue Reigns? Well, you went right to Roman Reigns here, but what about the idea with the potential for gambling on WWE? If the finish is locked up in an envelope, no one knows it, the wrestlers don't know what's going to happen, does that give wrestlers an opportunity to hold up the office?
Well, we just talked about this as far as obviously at the top of WrestleMania and traditionally in the business, when you're dealing with guys of the level of Rock versus Austin versus Cena versus Taker, whatever, that these finishes, if not one step in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other, but who's going to win and who's going to lose is agreed to before the whole thing is announced. Because for that reason, because what if you book Austin versus The Rock, and The Rock don't think it's the time for him to do the job. Or if they did the Rock and Cena program where, okay, Rock wins the first one, Cena wins the second one, we don't do a third one. That way we're still even. That type of negotiation goes on amongst big stars. So the thought that, I mean, it's so preposterous on every level that we've talked about, but the thought that they could open up an envelope at WrestleMania at 5:30 on the afternoon of the show and tell Roman Reigns then whether he's winning or losing for the terms of the story and the way they tell it leading up, in terms of the way that they're mentally thinking about putting the match together. You've got to know before that. We've talked about all of that, but here's something that we didn't mention. Why would the WWE care? Because how are they making money off of it? Because they're supposed to be keeping the finish secret and only known by a handful of people in some accounting firm or whatever. I would assume the people that in the WWE that would know the finish are the ones that are not allowed to bet on aforesaid finish. So if Roman Reigns says, well, I'm going to goddamn not do this, then what does the WWE, I mean, they care because they want their belt to be on somebody, but how would it affect them financially? Because they wouldn't be allowed to bet if they knew to begin with who was going to win. So how could they say, well, no, you're going to cost us a lot of money if you don't do this job because we bet on the other fucking guy? Well, that can't happen. So how would they have a dog in the fight, and how would they make money off this at all? And if that's the case, then why are they pushing for this? How are they going to make the money?
What if it's just about ginning up interest in the product or finding something that will hopefully make some big moments bigger?
Well, it sounds like they're ginning something up in the fucking bathtub, and the fucking DEA and the goddamn, prohibition agents ought to be on this. Also, that's a good point. Why would the WWE care how the betting goes on a match? Because they theoretically wouldn't be able to partake in that, right? So they wouldn't care how the betting goes, but they would care whether, if they booked a match between Roman Reigns and goddamn Sasha Banks, that they probably want Roman to go over. This whole thing doesn't make any goddamn, and anybody who bets on this is just looking to throw their money away or have a lark. You can't approach this seriously.
Well, speaking of things you can't approach seriously, the drive-thru is closed. That'll be our final question this week. Sorry for the subdued nature, everyone, but I'm in pain.
You're on drugs.
I'm on drugs, and I'm literally dripping blood. I have a drain here, so I gotta.
Oh, God.
I gotta take care of things.
Please, stop it.
But with that, the drive-thru has closed. Where's this? This is under 10 pounds, so I can lift it. We'll be back this weekend on the Jim Cornette Experience, wherever you find your favorite podcast, the AEW Dynamite review, the WWE SmackDown review, the biography series, I believe, and who knows what else. Someone usually does something stupid between now and then. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, the Jim Cornette Experience. Go through the archives today, patreon.com/Cornette. If you'd like to check out the show going back to the very beginning in 2013, go through the archives, patreon.com/Cornette. And don't forget, it's only $5 a month. Of course, you could subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. It'll come right up. Full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, all with the very popular Travis Heckel artwork. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com. And of course, check out The Wrestling News directly from thewrestlingnews.com, or every single day, download Arcadian Vanguard's The Wrestling News wherever you find your favorite podcasts for a free daily wrestling newscast. All the news that has happened for free for you. The Wrestling News. Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com. What's going on over there?
Write in and tell us where we should send this charity money.
at JimCornette.com. The Drive-Thru is brought to you by the law office of Stephen P. New, fully clothed at 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen. Wow, I picked up my voice and I felt a little tinge in my back here.
You're going to pull something, I'm telling you.
I may have to go back in. I may have to call Stephen. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. We'll be back next week on the Drive-Thru and, of course, this weekend on The Experience. For Jim Cornette, I am the great Brian Last, and I'm bleeding. Tally-ho!